Hello everyone, and welcome to the DXD Tales. So we are back with an interesting movie on what if Issei was a god of thunder and fall in love with the priestess of thunder Akeno Himejima. But before we start, I just want to remind you to please subscribe to my channel and hit the like button if you enjoy my content. Let's start the story. Chapter 1. Divine Awakening. The air crackled with unseen energy as Issei Hyodo trudged home through the darkening streets of Kuo. Storm clouds gathered overhead with unnatural speed, swirling in patterns that meteorologists would find impossible to explain. For the third time that week, the weather forecast had failed spectacularly, predicting clear skies when tempestuous darkness now loomed instead. Issei glanced upward, an inexplicable tightness gripping his chest. The churning clouds seemed to follow his path, concentrating directly above him with each step. He'd noticed this pattern recently, his moods strangely synchronized with atmospheric pressure changes. Today's frustration over another failed attempt to speak with Yuma Amano had coincided with distant thunder that grew steadily closer. Ridiculous, he muttered, quickening his pace as the first fat raindrop struck his cheek. Weather doesn't follow people. Lightning forked across the sky, illuminating the empty street in stark white brilliance. The thunder that followed came almost instantly, too close, too centered above him to be coincidence. Issei broke into a run as rain began to fall in earnest, sheets of water cascading from clouds that seemed almost alive with electrical activity. Ducking under the shelter of an ancient shrine gate, Issei shook water from his hair and uniform jacket. The wooden structure stood at the entrance to one of Kuo's forgotten shrines, a relic from before the city's modernization. He'd passed it countless times but never ventured inside. Now, with lightning striking dangerously close, the overground path beyond the Torii gate offered his only nearby refuge. The shrine grounds were in disrepair. Moss-covered stone lanterns lined a cracked pathway leading to a modest wooden building. Despite years of neglect, something about the place resonated with Issei. The air felt different here, charged with something beyond mere electricity. Each breath filled his lungs with energy that made his fingertips tingle. Strange place to seek shelter during a thunderstorm, came a melodious voice from behind him. Issei spun around, heart pounding. A figure stood in the shadows of the shrine bewheel. Ding! A girl in a traditional Miko outfit, her long black hair tied back in an orange ribbon. Lightning flashed, illuminating striking violet eyes that studied him with unsettling intensity. Most would avoid high ground during such unusual weather, she continued, stepping forward. Her movement was graceful, deliberate, as though she were performing some ancient ritual with each footfall. I didn't have much choice, Issei replied, trying to ignore how the storm seemed to intensify at the sound of his voice. The lightning was following me. Rather than laughing at this absurd statement, the girl's expression grew more intent. Following you? How fascinating. She approached closer, stopping just beyond arm's reach. I'm Akeno Himejima, and you are Issei Hyodo. Do you work here? He gestured at the dilapidated shrine, where rainwater now poured through several holes in the roof. Akeno's lips curved into a cryptic smile. I maintain certain traditions. This shrine has been without a proper caretaker for decades, but it still serves its purpose for those with eyes to see. Another lightning strike, closer still, directly hitting a tree just outside the shrine grounds. The thunder was instantaneous, a physical force that shook the wooden structure and sent vibrations through Issei's bones. Yet Akeno didn't flinch. Her eyes remained fixed on him, watching his reaction with scholarly fascination. The storm's getting worse, Issei said, moving toward the shrine's entrance. We should get inside. Akeno nodded, but her expression suggested the weather was precisely what she'd expected. Yes, come inside. There's something you should see. The interior was surprisingly well maintained compared to the exterior, clean wooden floors, simple but elegant furnishings, and at the center, a small altar unlike any Issei had seen in other Shinto shrines. Instead of the usual sacred mirror, this one featured a peculiar stone tablet etched with a symbol resembling a lightning bolt splitting a circle. What kind of shrine is this? Issei asked, drawn toward the tablet despite himself. One of the last dedicated to the old thunder gods, Akeno replied, lighten. A small oil lamp that cast dancing shadows across the walls. Few remember them now. Their worship was ancient even when Buddhism arrived in Japan. Outside, the storm reached new intensity. Rain hammered against the roof like thrown pebbles, and lightning struck in such rapid succession that the room was continuously illuminated in strobing flashes of white-blue light. "Have you always had dreams about storms, Issei Hyodo?" Akeno asked, her voice barely audible above the tempest. The question struck him like a physical blow. Since childhood, his dreams had been filled with impossible storms, hurricanes where he stood untouched at the center, lightning that responded to his thoughts, clouds that formed patterns at his command. Dreams he'd never shared with anyone. "How could you possibly know that?" he demanded. Akeno didn't answer directly. Instead, she gestured toward the stone tablet. The ancients believed certain souls carried divine essence, fragments of godhood waiting to awaken under the right circumstances. This marker responds to such essence. As if on cue, the etched lightning bolt began to emit a faint blue glow, pulsing in rhythm with the thunderclaps outside. "What's happening?" Issei stepped back, but found himself unable to look away from the increasingly brilliant light. "It's responding to you," Akeno whispered, wonder and satisfaction mingling in her voice. "After all these years of waiting, you've finally come." The marker's glow intensified until the entire shrine was bathed in ethereal blue light. Issei felt a strange pull, not physical, but something deeper. As though the tablet were calling to something buried within his soul. Without conscious decision, he reached toward it. "Should I?" "Trust your instincts," Akeno urged. "The thunder is already in your blood. It merely needs acknowledgement." His fingertips made contact with the cold stone, and the world exploded into light. Issei's consciousness expanded beyond his body, beyond the shrine, beyond the storm itself. He saw weather patterns spanning continents, felt the electrical potential between clouds and earth, tasted ozone and rain and raw power. Images flashed through his mind. Ancient warriors wielding lightning as weapons, robed figures channeling storms through ritual, and beings of pure electrical energy moving through the heavens. One image lingered longer than the rest. A towering figure shrouded in storm clouds, wielding a hammer that crackled with barely contained power. The figure turned, revealing a face both terrifying and familiar, his own face, transformed by divine purpose. When reality reasserted itself, Issei found himself on his knees, gasping for breath. The marker had shattered, fragments of stone scattered across the wooden floor, each piece still glowing with residual energy. What was that?" he managed, voice hoarse as though he'd been screaming. Akeno knelt beside him, her expression a mixture of reverence and excitement. "Awakening. The essence that slumbered within you for generations has finally stirred." She placed a hand on his shoulder, and Issei felt a complementary energy flowing from her touch, different from his own yet harmonious. Like two instruments playing counterpoint. "You carry the blood of thunder gods, Issei Hyodo. Ancient, powerful deities who once commanded the very skies." Under different circumstances, Issei might have laughed or dismissed her words as delusion. But the energy still coursing through his veins, the lingering visions, and the inexplicable connection he felt to the raw storm outside made denial impossible. "That's impossible," he said, even as he felt the truth of her words resonating within him. "I'm just ordinary. My parents are ordinary. Divine essence can lie dormant for generations," Akeno explained, helping him to his feet. "Sometimes for centuries, until the right combination of circumstances triggers awakening. Your connection to storms, the dreams, all signs that were overlooked or misunderstood." Lightning struck the shrine directly, but instead of destruction, the electrical energy seemed to flow through the structure like water through a channel, concentrating in the space between them. Without thinking, Issei raised his hand, and the crackling energy coalesced into a sphere of pure electrical power hovering above his palm. "This isn't possible," he whispered, staring at the miniature lightning storm contained in his hand. "And yet, you're doing it," Akeno replied, her voice soft with wonder. She reached toward the sphere, her fingers stopping just short of contact. Small arcs of electricity bridged the gap between the energy ball and her fingertips, dancing harmlessly across her skin. "Beautiful. Your control is instinctive. Most take years to achieve such precision." The moment of connection between them was shattered by a sound that didn't belong to the storm, a low, guttural growl from outside the shrine. Akeno's expression instantly transformed from wonder to alertness, her body tensing as she moved toward the entrance. "We have company," she said, her voice hardening. "Unwelcome company. Your awakening has drawn attention." "What kind of attention?" Issei asked, the energy sphere dissipating as his concentration broke. "The kind with teeth and claws," Akeno replied grimly. "Stay behind me." She slid open the shrine door, revealing 3 hulking shapes silhouetted against the storm-lit night. They moved with unnatural fluidity, their forms shifting between human and bestial with each lightning flash. Their eyes glowed amber in the darkness, fixed on Issei with predatory intensity. "Thunder Eaters," Akeno spat the word like a curse. "Parasites drawn to divine energy. They'll drain you dry if given the chance." One of the creatures let out a keening wail that raised the hairs on Issei's neck. It lunged forward with impossible speed, claws extended toward his chest. Before he could react, Akeno stepped into its path, her hands tracing a complex pattern in the air. Lightning answered her summons, striking downward in a precisely controlled bolt that intercepted the creature mid-leap. It howled in pain as electricity coursed through its body, convulsing before collapsing in a smoking heap. "You can control it too," Issei gasped, staring at Akeno with new understanding. "Differently," she replied, already preparing for the next attack as the remaining creatures circled warily. "I am a priestess of thunder, trained since childhood to channel and direct its power through ritual and discipline." Her eyes met his briefly. "What you do naturally, I've spent years learning." The second creature attacked from the side, moving low and fast. Issei reacted on instinct, electricity surging through his body and out through his extended hand. The bolt that emerged was wild, uncontrolled. It blasted a hole through the shrine wall before connecting with its target, sending the beast crashing through several trees. "Sorry about the shrine," Issei winced, looking at the smoldering hole. "Better the building than your throat," Akeno replied, her attention fixed on the third and largest creature, which watched them with calculating intelligence. "This one's older, smarter. Be ready." Instead of attacking directly, the creature raised its misshapen head and emitted a sound like tearing metal. The storm clouds above began to disperse, the electrical energy dissipating as if being drained away. "It's feeding on the storm energy," Akeno explained quickly. "Breaking your connection to the ambient power. We need to end this quickly." The creature's form solidified as it absorbed more energy, becoming more defined and dangerous. Sleek, scaled skin covering powerful muscles, claws extending to razor sharpness. With the storm diminishing, Issei felt his newfound power ebbing, slipping beyond his grasp. "I can't hold it," he gasped, the electricity dancing across his skin beginning to fade. "You don't need the storm," Akeno said urgently. "The power is within you, not the clouds. The lightning responds to you, not the other way around." The creature finished its feeding and crouched to spring, calculating the perfect angle of attack. Time seemed to slow as Issei searched within himself, beyond the surface power he'd been channeling from the storm. Deeper, in the core of his being, he found something else, a wellspring of energy that had always been there, unrecognized and untapped. As the creature launched itself toward them, Issei released that inner power. The result wasn't a single bolt but a corona of electrical energy that erupted from his entire body, expanding outward in a wave that illuminated the shrine grounds like daylight. The attacking creature was caught mid-leap, suspended momentarily in the electrical field before being violently repelled, its body smoking as it crashed through the Torii gate and disappeared into the night. Issei staggered, suddenly exhausted. Akeno caught him before he could fall, supporting his weight with surprising strength. "That was impressive," she said, genuine admiration in her voice. "Most newly awakened divinity requires years to access their inner power source." "Divine," Issei repeated the word, testing its weight. "You really believe I'm, what? Some kind of god?" "Not yet," Akeno replied, helping him back inside the shrine. "But you carry the essence of one. With training and time, you could become something this world hasn't seen in centuries." She guided him to a simple mat on the floor, where he sank down gratefully. The storm had completely dissipated now, leaving an unnatural stillness in its wake. Through the hole he'd blasted in the wall, stars were becoming visible as clouds cleared. "Those creatures," Issei began, trying to process everything that had happened. "You called them Thunder Eaters." What exactly are they? Minor parasitic entities that feed on divine electrical energy, Akeno explained, busying herself with preparing tea at a small brazier. Usually harmless scavengers that consume residual energy from natural lightning strikes. But they can sense Awak, ending divinity, and sometimes hunt in packs to drain a new god before they reach full strength. She handed him a steaming cup, and Issei noticed fine patterns of electricity still dancing across his fingers as he accepted it. How do you know all this? He asked. What exactly is a priestess of thunder? Akeno knelt across from him, her posture formal yet graceful. I belong to an ancient ord, dedicated to serving and protecting thunder deities. For generations, my family has maintained the old ways, preserving knowledge and rituals that most of the world has forgotten. She gestured to the shrine around them. This place was once one of many such sanctuaries throughout Japan. Now, it's one of the last. As belief in the old gods faded, so did their power and presence in this world. The last known thunder deity vanished over a century ago. Then why maintain the shrines? Why continue serving gods that no longer exist? Akeno's violet eyes met his with intensity that made his heart race. Because of prophecy. Because of hope. Because someday, the divine essence would reawaken in a worthy vessel. A slight smile curved her lips. Because of you, Issei Hyodo. The enormity of what she was suggesting overwhelmed him. Yesterday, his greatest concern had been working up the courage to ask Yuma on a date. Now, he was being told he carried the essence of an ancient deity. This is insane, he said, setting down the teacup. I can't be whatever you think I am. I'm just a normal high school student. Are you? Akeno challenged gently. Have you ever truly felt normal? Haven't you always sensed something different about yourself, something others couldn't see or understand? The question struck deeper than she could know. Throughout his life, Issei had felt a disconnection from those around him. Not superiority, but fundamental difference, as though he were a puzzle piece from another set, similar enough in shape to almost fit but never quite belonging. Even if what you're saying is true, he countered, what does it mean? What am I supposed to do with this? He gestured to the electrical energy still occasionally sparking between his fingers. That's for you to decide, Akeno replied. Divine power comes with divine responsibility, but how you interpret that responsibility is your choice. She leaned forward, her expression earnest. But first, you need to learn control. What happened tonight was just the beginning. Your powers will grow, and without proper training, they could become dangerous, to others and to yourself. And you can teach me. I can guide you. The priesthood has preserved techniques and knowledge specifically for this purpose. She hesitated, then added, but there's something you should know. You won't be the only one interested in your awakening. There are factions within the supernatural world that monitor divine manifestations closely. Supernatural world, Issei repeated faintly. Of course there is. Hino's lips quirked in amusement at his tone. Gods, devils, angels, yokai, all the beings of myth and legend. Most have retreated from human awareness, but they exist in the shadows and margins of your world. And many will take great interest in a new thunder deity. Before Issei could respond, a sound outside caught their attention, not the growl of returning creatures, but the distinctive whoosh of powerful wings. Akeno tensed, rising smoothly to her feet. It seems interest in your awakening has arrived sooner than expected, she murmured. 3 figures descended from the night sky, landing with perfect precision in the shrine courtyard. Their wings, actual, physical wings, folded behind them as they approached. The central figure, a tall man with golden hair and aristocratic features, stepped forward and bowed with formal precision. We come seeking the source of divine thunder, he announced, his voice carrying an accent Issei couldn't place. By the authority of the Asgardian IGH Council and the decree of divine oversight, we request audience with the awakened essence. Akeno moved to stand between Issei and the newcomers, her posture subtly shifting to one of protection. The council has no jurisdiction here. This shrine and its divinity fall under the protection of the Order of Sacred Thunder. The golden-haired man's expression hardened. The order was officially dissolved after the Concord of 1908. You have no standing, Priestess. The order acknowledges no such dissolution, Akeno replied coolly. Our authority comes from the gods themselves, not political agreements between pantheons. Watching this exchange, Issei felt a strange heat building in his chest. Not anger exactly, but something more primal. The dismissive way the stranger addressed Akeno. The presumptuous claim of authority over him. It triggered something deep and instinctive. He rose to his feet, and as he did, the air around him began to crackle with visible energy. Without conscious effort, his divine power responded to his emotions, manifesting as a nimbus of blue-white electricity that outlined his form. "I think," he said, surprised by the resonant quality that had entered his voice, "that decisions about my future should include my input." All eyes turned to him, and Issei saw the newcomers reassess him with newfound wariness. The power flowing through him felt right, natural, as though he'd finally found a language his body had always been meant to speak. The golden-haired messenger recovered quickly, offering a deeper bow. "Of course, Lord. Forgive the presumption. I am Balder, emissary of Asgard and servant to the All-Father. We come only to extend greeting and invitation to the Divine Council, and to remind the awakened essence of certain protocols regarding divine manifestation in the mortal realm," added one of his companions, a severe-looking woman with silver armor visible beneath her modern clothing. Akeno stepped closer to Issei, her voice low. "They fear unregistered divinity, power outside their control. Asgard has appointed itself regulator of divine affairs since the last great war between pantheons." "With good reason," Balder interjected, evidently possessing supernatural hearing. "Unregulated divine power has caused catastrophic damage throughout history. We merely seek to prevent such tragedies by controlling who can access their birthright," Akeno countered, "by deciding which gods may rise and which must remain dormant." The tension between them was palpable, centuries of conflict compressed into a single exchange. Issei looked between them, suddenly aware that he had stumbled into politics far older and more complex than he could comprehend. "I'm still trying to understand what's happening to me," he said finally. "I'm not making any decisions or joining any factions tonight." Balder's expression remained diplomatic, but Issei sensed disappointment. "Divine essence without guidance can be volatile, Lord. Especially thunder divinity, which responds strongly to emotional states." As if to emphasize his point, the electrical aura surrounding Issei intensified, small arcs jumping from his body to nearby metal objects. Akeno placed a calming hand on his arm, and Issei felt her energy harmonizing with his, helping him regain control. "He has guidance," she stated firmly. "The Order of Sacred Thund has prepared for this moment for generations." The female emissary stepped forward, her hand drifting to what Issei now recognized as a concealed weapon. "The Order is a remnant, Priestess. A hand full of practitioners clinging to outdated traditions. Proper divine training requires resources you cannot provide." Something in her tone, the dismissal, the condescension, broke Issei's attempt at diplomacy. He hadn't asked for any of this, didn't understand the politics or history at play, but he recognized a power play when he saw one. "I think," he said, allowing his power to flare visibly, "that I'll decide what's proper for my training." The electrical field around him expanded, pushing the emissaries back a step. It wasn't a conscious attack, merely an expression of his irritation, but its effect was unmistakable. Balder raised his hands in a placating gesture. "We intended no offense, Lord. The invitation to Asgard remains open when you feel ready to explore your heritage further." He produced an ornate card that seemed to shimmer with its own inner light. "This will connect you to our earthly embassy when you wish to speak with us." Issei accepted the card cautiously. The moment his fingers touched it, symbols etched on its surface glowed briefly, responding to his divine essence. "We will withdraw for now," Balder continued, stepping back and extending his wings once more. "But be warned, others will sense your awakening. Not all will be as diplomatic as Asgard." With that parting caution, the three emissaries launched themselves skyward, wings carrying them rapidly beyond sight. In the silence that followed their departure, Issei exhaled shakily. The electrical field surrounding him gradually dissipated as his emotions stabilized. "Are all divine politics this intense?" he asked, attempting humor to mask his unease. "That was actually quite cordial by their standards," Akeno replied with a small smile. "No threats of divine retribution or calls for binding oaths. They must be truly interested in your potential." Issei sank back onto the mat, suddenly exhausted. The adrenaline that had carried him through the night's events was fading, leaving bone-deep weariness in its wake. What happens now? Akeno knelt beside him, her expression softening. Now, you rest. Divine awakening taxes both body and spirit. Tomorrow is soon enough to begin proper training. Training, Issei repeated. Will I need to leave school? My home? Not at all, she assured him. Divine essence must learn to exist within the mortal world, not apart from it. Why? Our human connections will help anchor your divinity, preventing the detachment that has led other gods to madness. She hesitated, then added, though you should know that I attend Kuo Academy as well. Third-year student and vice president of the Occult Research Club. Issei stared at her in surprise. You're a student, but the shrine, the priestess duties. Divine service exists alongside mortal life, not in place of it. Akeno explained. The balance between the two is essential for those who work with divine power. Something you'll need to learn as well. A thought struck him. Does this mean there are others at school who are not ordinary? Akeno's enigmatic smile returned. Kuo Academy has become something of a nexus for supernatural entities in recent years. The devils control the school administration, though they maintain an excellent academic program for both human and non-human students. Devils, Issei repeated faintly. At my school, running my school, the Grimoire and Citri families. Specifically, Akeno confirmed, they're quite progressive as devil families go, interested in peaceful coexistence rather than soul collection. Issei rubbed his temples, where a headache was beginning to form. This is too much to process all at once. Which is why rest comes first, Akeno said firmly. Your mind needs time to adjust to both your awakening and all you've learned tonight. She rose gracefully and moved to a small storage chest, from which she extracted a folded futon. You should stay here tonight. The shrine's protections will keep you safe while you're vulnerable. And I can begin explaining more in the morning. As she prepared the simple bed, Issei watched her movements, the deliberate grace, the quiet confidence, the occasional glance in his direction when she thought he wasn't looking. Despite the bizarre circumstances, he felt a connection to this mysterious priestess that transcended their short acquaintance. Akeno, he said as she finished arranging the bedding. Thank you, for helping me, for protecting me from those creatures. For everything. She paused, genuine warmth replacing her formal demeanor. It has been the purpose of my family for generations. Issei. But beyond duty, she met his eyes directly. I believe you are exactly what this world needs, a true god of thunder, awakened in a time of coming darkness. What darkness? He asked, alarmed by her sudden seriousness. Akeno shook her head. Tomorrow is time enough for darker discussions. Tonight, you should focus on recovery. As Issei settled onto the futon, fatigue overtaking him despite his racing thoughts, Akeno moved to leave the shrine. You're not staying? He asked, surprised at his own disappointment. I have preparations to make, she replied. The first day of training requires certain ritual components. Rest well, Issei Hyodo. Your journey as a god begins at dawn. After she departed, Issei lay awake for some time, watching. Small sparks of electricity dance across his fingertips as he processed the night's revelations. God of thunder, divine essence, supernatural politics. It was too fantastic to be real, yet the power flowing through his veins was undeniable. Eventually, exhaustion claimed him, and his consciousness drifted into dreams filled with storms and lightning. But for the first time, these dreams weren't mysterious or frightening. They were familiar, welcoming, like returning to a homeland he'd never known he'd lost. Morning arrived with golden light filtering through the damaged shrine wall. Issei woke feeling remarkably refreshed, the divine energy within him having accelerated his recovery during sleep. He sat up, momentarily disoriented by unfamiliar surroundings before the previous night's events came rushing back. He examined his hands, which now appeared perfectly normal. No visible electricity, no supernatural glow. Yet when he concentrated, he could feel the power simmering just beneath the surface. Responsive to his thoughts in a way that felt both exhilarating and terrifying. The shrine door slid open, and Akeno entered carrying a tray with simple breakfast items. She had Issei Nged her Miko outfit for a Kuo Academy uniform, though she still moved with the same disciplined grace. You slept well, she observed, setting down the tray. Your aura is already stabilizing, another sign of natural affinity. I feel different, Issei admitted, accepting the offered tea. More aware of everything. The air pressure, electrical currents in the walls, even the bioelectricity in your body. Akeno nodded approvingly. Enhanced perception is typically the first stable ability to manifest. Your divine essence is attenuating itself to its natural domain. As they ate, Akeno outlined what Issei could expect in the coming days: training sessions at the shrine after school, exercises to control his growing abilities, and knowledge about the supernatural world he had unwittingly entered. What about school? Issei asked. How do I act normal when I can feel the electrical impulses in everyone's nervous systems? The same way I and others with power do, Akeno replied. You compartmentalize. You learn to filter the information your senses provide. And you recognize that normal is largely a matter of behavior, not nature. She checked her watch and rose smoothly to her feet. Speaking of which, we should leave soon if we're to arrive on time. I've brought a spare uniform for you. As they walked to school together, Issei became increasingly aware of how Akeno's presence affected those around them. Students whispered and stared as they passed, many boys watching with undisguised admiration while girls alternated between envy and curiosity. You're popular, Issei observed. Akeno's lips curved in amusement. I have a certain reputation. As does the occult research club in general. And now people will wonder why you're walking with me, Issei realized aloud. I'm not exactly in your social circle. Social circles matter less than you might think, she replied cryptically. Besides, after today, you'll have your own reputation to manage. What does that mean? Before she could answer, a commotion near the school gates caught their attention. A crowd had gathered around something, or someone, that Issei couldn't see. As they drew closer, the crowd parted, revealing a striking silver-haired young woman dressed in formal attire that seemed out of place among the school uniforms. Rosweiss, Akeno murmured, her posture subtly shifting to alertness. Valkyrie of the Asgardian diplomatic corps. It seems Baldur wasn't exaggerating about their interest in you. The silver-haired woman spotted them immediately, her eyes fixing on Issei with laser-like focus. She approached with military precision, stopping at a respectfully formal distance. Issei Hyodo, she stated rather than asked. I am Rosweiss, appointed observer and liaison to newly awakened divinity. By decree of the All-Father, I will be joining Kuo Academy as a student teacher to facilitate your transition. Whispers erupted around them as students strained to hear this bizarre introduction. Issei felt dozens of eyes on him, questions forming in their minds about why this striking foreigner would single him out. Perhaps, Akeno suggested with deceptive pleasantness, such discussions would be better conducted in private. Rosweiss acknowledged this with a curt nod. The Occult Research Club room after final bell. The Grimoire heir has already granted permission for use of the space. Her gaze shifted to Akeno, a subtle challenge in her eyes. All interested parties are welcome to attend. With that pronouncement, she turned and walked toward the administration building, leaving stunned silence in her wake. Well, Issei said after a moment, so much for keeping a low profile. Akeno's expression was carefully controlled, but Issei could say the electricity in her body responding to her irritation, a subtle increase in charge that his newfound senses detected easily. Asgard rarely does anything subtly, she remarked. They prefer visible displays of authority. As they continued toward the school building, Issei noticed other students watching him with new curiosity. His life as an ordinary high school student was already slipping away, replaced by something both more dangerous and more extraordinary. Akeno, he said quietly, last night you mentioned coming darkness. What did you mean? She hesitated, glancing around at the crowded courtyard. Not here. But yes, there are reasons beyond coincidence for your awakening now, at this time. The divine essence manifests when needed most. Needed for what? The warning bell rang before she could answer, signaling 5 minutes until first period. For balance, she said finally. For protection. For what comes next. She touched his arm briefly, the contact sending a pleasant harmonic resonance through his divine energy. After school, Issei Hyodo. After school, your education as a god truly begins. As Akeno departed for her own classroom, Issei stood momentarily alone in the bustling hallway. Students flowed around him, unaware of the power now dwelling within their classmate or the supernatural politics that had just invaded their school. He took a deep breath, feeling the electrical energy of his divine essence responding to his resolve. Whatever came next, training, politics, or the mysterious darkness Akeno had mentioned, he would face it head-on. For better or worse, Issei Hyodo was no longer just a high school student with ordinary dreams and ambitions. He was a god of thunder awakening to his power, standing at the threshold of a world hidden behind the veil of human perception. And somehow, despite the danger and uncertainty ahead, it felt right. It felt like destiny. Chapter 1 and Chapter 2, The Priestess's Path. Afternoon Sue. Light filtered through the maple trees surrounding the ancient shrine, casting dappled shadows across weathered stone steps. Issei paused halfway up the path, adjusting the unfamiliar weight of the sea. Loath-wrapped bundle Akeno had instructed him to bring. The day had passed in a blur of whispered rumors and sidelong glances from classmates who'd witnessed his strange encounter with Rossweiss that morning. Breathe, he reminded himself, feeling electricity respond to his agitation by crackling beneath his skin. Just breathe. The meeting in the Occult Research Club room had been mercifully postponed. The enigmatic Riest Ramori had sent word that territorial negotiations with visiting devil dignitaries required her attention. Rossweiss had accepted this with visible disappointment, scheduling for the following day while fixing Issei with a look that clearly communicated this wasn't over. Akeno had simply smiled that mysterious smile of hers, suggesting they use the unexpected Reaper Iev for his first proper training session. The shrine at sunset, she'd murmured before disappearing into the crowd of students. Bring clothes you don't mind getting singed. Now, standing before the torii gate he'd sheltered under during yesterday's storm, Issei felt the sacred boundary like a physical presence. The air beyond the gate hummed with potential, recognizing the divine spark within him. He stepped through, and the world shifted subtly, colors intensifying, sounds clarifying, the electrical currents in the atmosphere becoming visible to his enhanced perception as faint blue lines crisscrossing the sky. You're beginning to see the currents, Akeno observed, appearing silently beside him. She had changed from her school uniform into traditional Miko attire, her long black hair tied back with the same orange ribbon. Most take months to develop that level of perception. It's stronger here, Issei replied, watching the ethereal patterns shift with air currents. Like the boundary amplifies everything. Sacred spaces act as focal points for divine energy, she explained, gesturing for him to follow her up the remaining steps. This shrine was built at a natural convergence of electromagnetic ley lines, what the ancients called dragon paths, for the way electrical energy coils through the earth. The shrine looked different in daylight, smaller yet somehow more dignified. Its weathered wood and faded paint speaking of centuries of devotion. Akeno had clearly been busy. The hole Issei had blasted through the wall during last night's confrontation was covered with fresh paper and wooden slats. And the interior had been thoroughly cleaned. In the central courtyard behind the main shrine building, Akeno had prepared what appeared to be a training area. And stone markers formed a perfect circle 30 feet in diameter, each etched with symbols similar to the tablet that had shattered during Issei's awakening. At the circle's center stood a single bronze rod, polished to mirror brightness and extending 6 feet into the air. The Circle of Storms, Akeno said, noting his interest. A traditional training ground for thunder deities and their servants. The markers create a contained field where you can release power without risk to the surrounding area. She gestured to the bundle he carried. You brought what I asked for. Issei unwrapped the package, revealing simple black clothing, loose cotton pants and a sleeveless top. Will these work? Perfect. Natural fibers conduct electricity better than synthetics. Change inside, then we'll begin. When Issei emerged in the training clothes, he found Akeno kneeling before a small altar at the edge of the stone circle. She was arranging ritual implements with practiced precision, a bronze bowl filled with water, incense releasing thin tendrils of fragrant smoke, and a ceremonial knife with symbols etched along its blade. Is all this necessary for training? He asked, watching her methodical movements. The ritual aspects serve multiple purposes, she replied without looking up. They focus your concentration, create appropriate spiritual conditions, and, perhaps most importantly, connect you to the lineage of thunder deities who came before. She rose smoothly, the picture of ceremonial grace. Divine power without context or tradition becomes merely force. It's the cultural and spiritual framework that transforms raw energy into true divinity. Issei nodded, though privately he wondered if his power wouldn't respond just as well to simple practice. The electrical energy within him felt natural, instinctive, not something that required elaborate ritual to access. Reading his expression, Akeno's lips curved slightly. You doubt the value of ceremony. Understandable. Saint newly awakened divinity prefers action to reflection. She gestured toward the bronze rod at the circle's center. Perhaps a demonstration would be more convincing than explanation. She stepped into the circle, and immediately the air around her changed, thickening with potential energy that made Issei's newly sensitive perceptions tingle. With deliberate movements, she approached the bronze rod and placed her palm against its surface. The traditions of the Sacred Order of Thunder date back to the earliest days of human civilization, she began, her voice taking on a rhythmic quality. When the first lightning struck the first tree, and frightened humans looked skyward in wonder and terror. As she spoke, energy began to flow visibly through her body, illuminating her from within. A subtle violet glow that matched her eyes. Those with sensitivity to electrical energy became the first intermediaries between humanity and the storm, the original Thunder Priesthood. Her other hand traced symbols in the air, leaving lingering trails of light. They learned to channel, to direct, to commune with the raw power of the heavens. The bronze rod began to respond, resonating with her energy and emitting a low, musical hum. Clouds formed directly above the circle despite the previously clear sky, swirling in a tight spiral. Through ritual, they discovered patterns in chaos. Through discipline, they found control in wildness. Through devotion, they connected mortal understanding to divine power. Lightning formed within the miniature storm cloud, coiling like a serpent seeking direction. With precise gestures, Akeno guided the electrical energy into complex patterns, first a spiral, then a lattice, finally a perfect sphere of contained lightning that hovered above the rod. This is the heritage of the Thunder Priesthood, she concluded, releasing the energy upward where it dissipated harmlessly. Not merely using power, but understanding it, speaking its language, honoring its nature. The display was undeniably impressive. Issei could feel the mathematical precision behind her manipulations, the careful balance of energies that allowed such delicate control. He searched for adequate words, beautiful. Akeno inclined her head, accepting the compliment with grace. Now it's your turn. Step into the circle and approach the rod. Issei complied, immediately sensing the difference as he crossed the boundary marked by the stone tablets. Within the circle, his divine essence responded more readily, like an instrument finding perfect acoustic conditions. Place your hand on the conductor and listen, Akeno instructed. Not with your ears, but with your essence. Feel the currents that flow through metal, earth, and air. The moment his fingers touched the bronze surface, Issei's consciousness expanded dramatically. Suddenly he was aware of electrical pathways extending in all directions, currents flowing through the ground beneath his feet. Potential differences in the air above, the bioelectrical signals of every living thing within 100 yards. I can feel everything, he whispered, overwhelmed by the influx of information. That's natural for a thunder deity, Akeno replied, her voice seeming to come from both outside and inside his mind simultaneously. Your domain extends to all forms of electrical energy, from lightning strikes to the subtle currents in a human heart. Guided by her calm instructions, Issei began to sort through the overwhelming sensory input, learning to filter and focus. Gradually, the chaotic flood of information resolved into comprehensible patterns, a living map of energy that responded to his attention. Now, Akeno continued, draw from your inner wellspring. Not the energy around you, but the divine spark within. Let it flow through your arm and into the conductor. Issei concentrated, reaching for the core of power he'd accessed during the previous night's confrontation. It responded eagerly, perhaps too eagerly, surging through his body with such intensity that the bronze rod began to glow cherry red. Too much, Akeno cautioned, placing her hand over his. Her touch modulated the flow, bringing it under control. Divine essence requires balance. Think of it as a conversation, not a command. You are asking the power to work with you, not forcing it to obey. Under her guidance, Issei adjusted his approach. Rather than pushing energy outward, he allowed it to rise naturally, directing it with gentle intention rather than forceful will. The rod's temperature stabilized, and the energy began to flow more harmoniously. Better, Akeno approved. Now, envision a simple shape, a sphere, perhaps, and allow your energy to form that pattern above the rod. Issei pictured a perfect sphere, and the electrical energy responded, though not quite as he intended. Instead of the pristine orb Akeno had created, his power formed a roiling, dynamic ball with constant internal movement. Lightning arcing chaotically within its boundaries. Don't fight its nature, Akeno advised, observing the wild energy construct. Your divine essence expresses itself differently than mine. I channel thunder. You embody it. The difference is fundamental. She circled him, adjusting his posture with light touches that sent pleasant resonances through his divine energy. Your essence is primal, unfiltered. Don't try to constrain it into perfect forms, guide it toward its natural expression. Following her suggestion, Issei relaxed his mental image, allowing his instincts to shape the energy. The sphere transformed, becoming less geometrically perfect but more stable, a miniature storm system with internal structure that reflected Issei's intuitive understanding of electrical patterns. Yes, Akeno murmured approvingly. That's your natural expression. Wild but purposeful, chaotic but coherent. For nearly an hour, they worked through basic exercises, forming different energy constructs. Sensing distant electrical sources, modulating power output. Throughout, Akeno's teaching style balanced technical instruction with philosophical context, explaining not just how to manipulate thunder energy but why certain approaches work better than others. Divine power responds to intention and identity, she explained as Issei struggled to maintain a particularly complex pattern. The stronger your understanding of self, the more coherent your control becomes. Is that why gods have defined domains and personalities in mythology? Issei asked, allowing the energy construct to dissipate as he caught his breath. Despite the physical exertion, he felt energized rather than tired, his divine essence actually increasing in potency through use. Precisely, Akeno nodded. The myths humans tell about gods reflect this fundamental truth. Divine essence expresses itself through consistent patterns that mortals interpret as personality and preference. She smiled slightly. Though which comes first, the divine nature or the stories told about it, is an ancient philosophical debate. She moved toward the small altar at the circle's edge, retrieving a cloth-wrapped object. You've made remarkable progress for a first session. Now it's time to try something more practical. Unwrapping the cloth revealed a tanto, a traditional Japanese dagger with a simple leaf. R-wrapped hilt and a blade that gleamed with unusual luster. Okonomizumi steel, Akeno explained, presenting the weapon with both hands. Forged with lightning-struck sand in the metal, it conducts divine thunder energy exceptionally well. Issei accepted the blade carefully. The moment his fingers closed around the hilt, he felt a resonance with the metal, his divine essence recognizing a compatible conduit. Many thunder deities through history have wielded specific weapons, Akeno continued. The most famous being Mjolnir, of course, but there are countless others across different cultures, vajras, axe heads. Spears tipped with conductive metals. You want me to fight with this? Issei asked, examining the blade with uncertainty. He'd never trained in any martial art, let alone weapon combat. Eventually, she replied, today, we'll begin with simple channeling exercises. Hold the tanto before you and direct a small amount of your energy through the blade. Issei complied, using a thread of power down his arm and into the weapon. The response was immediate and dramatic. The blade illuminated with blue-white energy that extended the cutting edge with a corona of electrical power. Excellent, Akeno approved. This basic technique turns a physical weapon into a channel for divine power. With practice, you'll learn to adjust the intensity and form to suit different situations. She demonstrated several stances, showing how the energized blade could be used both offensively and defensively. Though the movements were foreign to him, Issei found his body adapting with surprising ease, as though some muscle memory from previous incarnations guided his limbs. Your divine essence carries echoes of past wielders, Akeno observed, noticing his unexpected aptitude. He knowledge of thunder gods who came before resides within you, waiting to be accessed. After several repetitions of basic forms, Akeno called for a break. They moved to the shrine's wooden porch, where she had prepared a simple meal and tea. As they sat, Issei noticed her studying him with analytical interest. "What?" he asked, self-conscious under her scrutiny. "I'm trying to determine which thunder tradition you most closely embody," she replied. "Different cultures developed distinct relationships with storm deities. Understanding your lineage would help focus your training." She sipped her tea thoughtfully. "Your energy signature contains elements of several traditions. There's the raw power of Thor, but also the precision of Raijin, and something else, perhaps Indra's strategic aspect." "Does it matter?" Issei asked. "I mean, they're all thunder gods, right?" "They're as different as lightning is from static electricity," Akeno corrected. Thor's domain encompassed protection and hallowing alongside thunder. Raijin focused on the purifying aspects of storm energy. Indra was a warrior king who used lightning as a weapon of righteous authority. She set down her cup, her expression turning serious. "The path you choose to follow will shape how your divine essence expresses itself in this world." The implication settled heavily on Issei's shoulders. Until now, he'd been focused on the immediate challenges, controlling his power, understanding his new reality. The idea that he might need to define what kind of god he would become added a philosophical dimension he hadn't considered. "How do I choose?" he asked finally. "You already are choosing, with every decision and reaction," Akeno replied. "Divine essence responds to character and intent. Your actions shape your divinity as much as your divinity shapes your actions." Before Issei could respond, a subtle shift in the electromagnetic field surrounding the shrine caught his attention. He turned toward the Torii gate, sensing an approaching presence with significant spiritual power. "Someone's coming," he said, rising to his feet. "Someone with unusual energy." Akeno nodded, unsurprised. "You're getting better at sensing auras." "Yes, we have a visitor." She didn't seem alarmed, though her posture straightened slightly. "A devil, though not an unfriendly one." Moments later, a figure appeared at the top of the shrine steps, a young woman with long black hair and blue-rimmed glasses that caught the late afternoon sunlight. She wore the Kuo Academy uniform with impeccable precision, her posture formal and dignified. "Tsubaki Shinra," Akeno greeted, rising gracefully. "An unexpected pleasure. What brings the vice president of the student council to our humble shrine?" Tsubaki adjusted her glasses with a precise movement. "Unusual energy fluctuations have been detected throughout the area. President Sona requested I investigate the source." Her gaze shifted to Issei, assessing him with analytical intensity. "I see the rumors about Hyodo-kun are substantiated." "You know about me?" Issei asked, surprised that his situation had already spread to the devil community. "The awakening of divine essence within Kuo's boundaries would hardly go unnoticed," Tsubaki replied. "Particularly thunder divinity, which tends toward conspicuous manifestation." There was something in her tone, not quite disapproval, but certainly caution, that triggered a flicker of defensive pride in Issei. He straightened, allowing a hint of his divine aura to manifest around him. "I'm still learning control," he said. Meeting her gaze directly, something shifted in Tsubaki's expression, a momentary widening of eyes, quickly controlled. "Indeed, that much is evident from the atmospheric disturbances your training has caused. Perhaps you'd care to join us for tea," Akeno suggested, her tone pleasant but with an undercurrent Issei was beginning to recognize as her diplomatic voice. Quote, "We can discuss the Citri clan's concerns directly." Tsubaki hesitated, glancing between them before inclining her head in formal acceptance. "That would be acceptable. Thank you for your hospitality." As they settled around the small table on the shrine porch, Issei observed their visitor more carefully. Despite her devil nature, Tsubaki carried herself with a discipline and formality that reminded him more of Akeno than the flamboyant devil stereotypes from human mythology. "The Citri clan has historical knowledge of thunder deities," Tsubaki explained after accepting tea. "In previous eras, conflicts between devils and storm gods caused significant, collateral damage. Ancient history," Akeno countered smoothly. "The Accords of Mutual Recognition established boundaries between pantheons and devil territories centuries ago. Accords that presumed no new deities would awaken without oversight," Tsubaki pointed out, her gaze shifting to Issei. especially in territories formerly ceded to devil governance. Issei felt tension building in the air, not just metaphorically, but literally, as his divine essence responded to the implied challenge. Small static discharges began to manifest around his fingers. "I didn't exactly plan this," he said, struggling to maintain his composure. "I didn't even know devils were real until yesterday. Something that might have been Simpa." Thy flickered across Tsubaki's composed features. "Few humans do, until circumstances force awareness." She sipped her tea thoughtfully. "That's not the issue, however. The question is one of territorial protocol. Issei awakened here because this shrine is a focal point for thunder energy," Akeno explained. "Sacred ground established long before any territorial agreements with the devil clans." "A technicality," Tsubaki acknowledged, "but one with precedent." President Sona anticipated this argument. She adjusted her glasses again, a gesture Issei was beginning to recognize as a thinking habit. She proposes a compromise. Continued training under the Order's guidance, with regular monitoring by the Student Council to ensure containment of divine energy within agreed boundaries. Akeno's expression remained pleasant, but Issei sensed the subtle increase in her own electrical field, a priestess preparing to defend her territory. "And if we decline monitoring?" she asked. "Then forma arbitration would be required through the Supernatural Accord Committee," Tsubaki replied. "A process that would undoubtedly attract attention from multiple factions beyond the devils." She glanced meaningfully at Issei, including those already expressing interest in the new thunder deity. The reference to Asgard's involvement wasn't subtle. Issei realized they were being offered a form of PR protection. Allowing the Seatree clan to claim official oversight would potentially shield him from immediate Asgardian interference. "Monitoring would be acceptable," he said before Akeno could respond, earning surprised looks from both women. "As long as it doesn't interfere with training." Tsubaki studied him with new interest. "A pragmatic approach. President Sona will be pleased." She set down her cup with precise movements. "I would, however, recommend accelerating your control training." The energy spillover from today's session was detectable across the entire city. "That's partially intentional," Akeno interjected. "Initial power expression needs to establish divine territory. Suppressing it too early can lead to destabilization." "Perhaps," Tsubaki conceded, "but it also serves as a beacon to less diplomatic interested parties." She turned to Issei, her formal demeanor softening slightly. "There are those who hunt newly awakened divine essence, Hyodo-kun. Predators who consume godhood to enhance their own power." A chill ran through Issei despite the warm evening. "Like the Thunder Eaters from last night." "Those were merely scavengers," Akeno said grimly. "Tsubaki AKS of more dangerous hunters, entities that specifically target nascent divinity before it reaches full strength. The Seatree clan has detected unusual movement patterns from several such predator groups," Tsubaki confirmed. "They appear to be converging toward Kuo." The implications settled heavily over the shrine. Issei looked between the two women, suddenly aware that despite their different affiliations, both were concerned for his safety. "How soon?" he asked. "Days, perhaps," Tsubaki replied. "Less, if your divine signature continues to broadcast so openly." Akeno rose, her expression resolute. "Then we should resume training immediately. Focused control exercises rather than power expression." Tsubaki nodded, standing with precise grace. "I'll inform President Sona of our arrangement." She turned to Issei, studying him with an intensity that made him acutely aware of her analytical intelligence. "You're adapting remarkably quickly, Hyodo-kun. Most newly awakened divinate. Why takes weeks to achieve coherent manifestation?" Coming from her, the observation felt like high praise. Issei inclined his head, unsure how to respond to a compliment from a devil vice president he'd just met. "Thank you for the warning," he said simply. Something subtle shifted in Tsubaki's demeanor, a slight softening around her eyes, a barely perceptible change in posture. It would be unfortunate to lose such an interesting development to hunters. She adjusted her glasses in what Issei was beginning to recognize as a gesture used to mask emotional reactions. "Particularly before the Student Council has properly assessed your potential." After Tsubaki departed, Akeno watched her descend the shrine steps with a thoughtful expression. "That was unexpected," she murmured. "The warning about hunters?" Issei asked. "No, That information was valuable but not surprising. Akeno turned to him with a slightly bemused smile. I meant Tsubaki Shinra's reaction to you. She's known for maintaining emotional distance. Even by devil standards. Issei recalled the subtle shifts in the devil's demeanor. She seemed perfectly formal to me. By human standards, perhaps, Akeno agreed. But I've known Tsubaki for years. That was the equivalent of showing significant personal interest. She studied him with renewed curiosity. Your divine essence appears to resonate with certain personalities. Interesting. Before Issei could process the implications of this observation, Akeno was already moving back toward the training circle. We need to adjust our approach. If hunters are converging, defensive techniques take priority over raw power development. The remainder of their session focused on containment and concealment, exercises designed to reduce Issei's divine energy signa. Chure while maintaining access to his power. It proved frustratingly difficult. His thunder essence naturally wanted to expand outward, to connect with atmospheric electrical patterns in ways that made stealth seemingly impossible. It's like trying to silence thunder, he complained after a particularly unsuccessful attempt at energy dampening. The whole point of thunder is to be heard. An apt observation, Akeno acknowledged. Thunder deities aren't naturally subtle. But consider, lightning itself chooses when to strike from otherwise innocuous clouds. Your essence can learn similar discretion. She demonstrated a technique that resembled grounding electrical charge, showing how divine energy could be cycled internally rather than broadcast externally. Issei attempted to mimic the pattern, achieving partial success after several attempts. Better, Akeno approved as the electrical aura surrounding him dimmed significantly. Your signature is now comparable to ambient storm energy rather than a divine beacon. They worked until twilight faded into true darkness, with Issei gradually gaining more control over his energy expression. By session's end, he could maintain a dampened state for several minutes at a time, not perfect, but significant progress. That's enough for today, Akeno finally announced. Divine essence needs time to acclimate to new patterns. Pushing too far can cause instability. Exhausted but satisfied, Issei helped gather the training implements. As they returned items to the shrine's storage, a comfortable silence developed between them, the Nadu. Raw rhythm of two people whose energies had found harmonious resonance. Akeno, Issei began as they finished, what Tsubaki said about hunters, how dangerous are they really? The priestess paused, considering her answer carefully. They vary in power and method. Some are ancient entities that have survived by consuming divine essence for millennia. Others are organized groups with specialized tools and techniques for capturing and extracting divinity. She met his gaze directly. All are extremely dangerous to nascent gods who haven't fully claimed their power. The honesty in her SS meant was both frightening and strangely comforting. Akeno clearly believed he deserved the unvarnished truth rather than false reassurance. Is that why the thunder gods disappeared? He asked. Were they hunted to extinction? Some were, she acknowledged, her expression somber. Others faded as belief in them waned. A few merged with more powerful deities or ascended to higher divine planes. She lit a small lamp as darkness settled fully over the shrine. The Order's records are incomplete on many disappearances. Issei absorbed this sobering reality. The power awakening within him read not just potential but significant danger. He had become prey in a supernatural ecosystem he barely understood. We should get you home, Akeno said, breaking his reverie. Your parents will worry if you're out too late. The mention of his family brought Issei back to more mundane concerns. What do I tell them? About all this, I mean. For now, nothing, Akeno advised. Until your divine essence stabilizes. Drawing mundane attention could create complications. The Occult Research Club provides good cover for your training time. As they prepared to leave the shrine, Akeno paused suddenly, her body tensing. Issei felt it a moment later, a disturbance in the electromagnetic field surrounding the shrine grounds, like static interference across multiple frequencies. Something's wrong, he said, instinctively reaching for the tanto they'd been training with. Akeno moved with practiced efficiency, extinguishing the lamp and guiding him toward the rear of the shrine. Multiple presences approaching. Not devils or Asgardians, their energy signatures are too chaotic. Through his developing divine senses, Issei detected at least 6 distinct entities moving up the shrine steps. Their electrical patterns were wrong somehow, fragmented and distorted, as though assembled from mismatched parts. Hunters, he whispered. Yes, Akeno confirmed grimly. Specifically, the kind Chi graft consumed divine essence onto themselves. Chimeras. She handed him the tanto, her expression deadly serious. They've come sooner than expected, which means they're opportunistic rather than strategic. That gives us an advantage. What's the plan? Issei asked, surprised by his own calm in the face of imminent danger. You'll remain hidden while I... No, he interrupted firmly. I'm not hiding while you face them alone. Akeno studied him for a moment, something unreadable flickering in her violet eyes. You're not fully trained. I'm a thunder god, Issei replied, allowing his divine essence to rise toward the surface. Electricity crackled along the tanto's blade as his power infused the metal. Or I'm becoming one. Either way, I don't hide from threats. A small smile curved Akeno's lips. Very Thor-like sentiment. She nodded toward the circle of storms. We'll make our stand there. The markers will contain our power and prevent collateral damage to the shrine. The Y moved silently through the darkness to the training area. Issei could sense the hunters spreading out to surround the shrine buildings, their movements revealing a predatory intelligence despite their chaotic energy signatures. They hunt by sensing divine essence, Akeno whispered as they reached the stone circle. Draw yours inward as we practiced. When they enter the circle, we'll have the advantage of prepared ground. Issei concentrated on the dampening technique they'd been practicing, pulling his divine energy tight around his core. The effort was mentally taxing but effective. His visible aura disappeared. Though he could still access his power internally. They didn't wait long. Within minutes, shadowy figures began to converge on the training area, drawn by the residual divine energy lingering from their earlier practice. In the moonlight, Issei caught disturbing glimpses of their forms, humanoid but wrong, with mismatched limbs and asymmetrical features that suggested hazard construction rather than natural growth. Patience, Akeno breathed, barely audible even to Issei's enhanced senses. Let them commit to the circle. The hunters moved with predatory caution, testing the air like animals scenting prey. The leader, a tall figure with too many joints in its arms, stepped into the stone circle first, followed by two more. The remaining three held back, watching from the perimeter. Divine essence detected, the leader rasped, its voice a discordant blend of multiple tones speaking simultaneously. Young, potent, thunder-aspected, feast, hissed one of its companions. A hunched entity with what appeared to be electrical burns covering half its body. Consume, ascend. When half the hunting party had entered the circle, Akeno gave Issei a subtle nod. In perfect synchronicity, they released their dampened power, Akeno's hands tracing glowing symbols in the air while Issei channeled divine energy through the tanto. The stone markers around the circle's perimeter activated instantly, creating a barrier that trapped the hunters inside with them. The creatures reacted with hisses of surprise and anger, their misshapen forms twisting as they reassessed their prey. Priestess, the leader snarled, recognition in its distorted features. Thunder servant, unexpected. You made a critical error, Akeno replied, her voice carrying the formal cadence of ritual declaration. You hunted on consecrated ground, sacred to the thunder deities. Lightning began to form between her outstretched hands, gathering into a concentrated orb of electrical energy. By the authority of the sacred order of thunder, I condemn your sacrilege. The hunters responded by attacking en masse, their movements unnaturally fast. Two lunged for Akeno while the leader and another charged toward Issei. Recognizing the divine essence as the primary prize, Issei met the attack with instinctive precision, the tanto in his hand moving as though guided by ancient memory. Divine electricity extended the blade's reach, creating an arc of power that sliced through the arm of the first attacker. The limb fell, twitching with residual energy, but no blood flowed from the wound, only a viscous gray substance that smelled of ozone and decay. The creature didn't scream or retreat. Instead, it pressed forward with increased frenzy, its remaining arm elongating unnaturally to grasp at Issei's throat. He ducked under the attack, driving the electrically charged tanto upward into the hunter's torso. Divine energy discharged through the blade, causing the creature to convulse violently before collapsing. No time to process his first kill, the leader was already upon him, moving with frightening speed. It possessed a weapon of its own, a curved blade that glowed with sickly yellow energy, suggesting divine essence corrupted and repurposed. Their weapons met in a clash of opposing energies, blue-white lightning against sulphurous yellow. The impact sent shockwaves through the circle, activating the stone marker's containment function more fully. A dome of translucent energy formed above them, isolating the battle from the outside world. Across the circle, Akeno was handling her attackers with practiced efficiency. Rather than using a physical weapon, she employed complex hand gestures that guided precisely targeted lightning strikes. Each bolt hit with surgical precision, disrupting the hunters' cobbled-together energy systems. Their cores, she called to Issei between strikes. Center mass, destroy the amalgamation point. Understanding immediately, Issei focused his divine senses on his opponent's electrical pattern. Beneath the chaotic surface energy, he detected a nexus where multiple divine signatures had been forcibly combined, a swirling vortex of stolen power that sustained the hunter's unnatural existence. The leader sensed his attention and attacked with renewed vigor, its movements becoming increasingly erratic and unpredictable. The corrupted blade came dangerously close to Issei's face, slicing through the air where his head had been a split second earlier. Drawing on the training exercises from earlier, Issei channeled a focused stream of divine energy through the tanto. The blade's glow intensified, electrical arcs extending its effective length to nearly double. With newly awakened instinct guiding him, Issei feinted left before pivoting sharply right, bringing the charged weapon around in an arc that bypassed the hunter's guard. The tanto struck true, piercing the creature's chest exactly where Issei had sensed the energy nexus. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the hunter's body began to destabilize, the stolen divine essences within it rejecting their forced unification. Light poured from cracks that appeared across its skin, accompanied by a high-pitched keening that hurt Issei's ears. Back, Akeno shouted, disengaging from her own opponents and racing toward him. It's destabilizing, she head him just as the hunter leader's body began to come apart more violently. With practiced movements, she traced a protective sigil in the air between them and the disintegrating creature. A barrier of concentrated electrical energy formed just in time to shield them from the explosion of released power. The hunter detonated in a blast of corrupted divine energy, fragments of its body dissolving into particles of light that scattered throughout the containment dome. The stolen essences, freed from their prison, swirled in chaotic patterns before gradually dissipating upward through the barrier. Returning to their source planes, Akeno explained, watching the lights fade. What little remains of them, at least. The remaining hunters, including those that had stayed outside the circle, retreated rapidly, disappearing into the darkness beyond the shrine grounds. The containment barrier shimmered once more before dissolving, the stone markers gradually dimming as their purpose was fulfilled. In the sudden quiet, Issei became aware of his racing heart and the residual electricity still crackling along his skin. The tanto in his hand had sustained damage, its blade partially melted from channeling more divine power than its material could safely conduct. You fought well, Akeno said, examining the weapon with professional interest. Especially for your first actual combat. It felt. Issei searched for the right words, natural. Like my body remembered techniques I've never learned. Akeno nodded, unsurprised. Divine essence carries echoes of previous incarnations. He weapon forms we practiced earlier awakened that muscle memory. She took the damaged tanto from him gently. This will need to be reforged. Perhaps something better suited to your specific energy signature. Now that the immediate danger had passed, reaction began to set in. Issei sank onto one of the stone markers, his hands trembling slightly as the adrenaline ebbed. I killed something, he said quietly. Something that was once human, maybe. No, Akeno corrected firmly, kneeling beside him. Chimera hunters were never human. They're constructs, divine essence forcibly bound to artificial vessels. What you destroyed was essentially a prison for stolen power fragments. She placed a hand on his shoulder, her touch grounding him as his divine energy fluctuated with his emotions. Quote, you freed what little remained of consumed divinities. It was an act of mercy as much as self-defense. Her explanation helped, though Issei still felt the weight of taking a life, artificial or otherwise. Something fundamental had changed within him tonight, beyond the continued awakening of his divine essence. He had crossed a threshold from which there was no return. Will there be more? He asked, already knowing the answer. Yes, Akeno replied honestly. These were merely opportunistic scouts, drawn by your initial awakening but not part of an organized hunt. Others will come, better prepared and more dangerous. She rose, surveying the aftermath of the battle. The stone circle had contained most of the damage, though scorch marks and cracked stones testified to the power that had been unleashed. You need proper weapons, she decided, and more intensive training. This encounter confirms you're developing faster than expected, which means we have less time than I'd hoped. Less time for what? For you to reach self-sustaining divinity, Akeno explained. There's a threshold after which divine essence becomes self-perpetuating, no longer vulnerable to extraction or consumption. Until you cross that threshold, you remain a target. She helped him to his feet, her expression resolute. Tomorrow we begin real combat training. No more basic exercises. As they worked to restore the training area, cleaning away evidence of the battle, Issei sensed Akeno watching him with evaluative interest. What? He asked eventually. You're changing, she observed. Not just your divine essence, but your fundamental self. The way you moved during combat, the decisions you made, they were different from the Issei Hyodo who arrived at this shrine yesterday. Her assessment was accurate. Issei could feel the transformation happening within him. Not just the developing divine power, but alterations to his thought patterns, instincts, even his perception of time and space. Is that normal? He asked. For awakening gods, I mean. It's expected, Akeno replied. Divine essence reshapes its vessel to better channel its nature. The human boy is becoming the god of thunder, gradually but inevitably. There was something in her tone, not quite sadness, but a complexity of emotion that Issei couldn't fully decipher. Does that bother you? He asked tentatively. No considered the question seriously before answering. The order has awaited the return of thunder divinity for generations. It's literally what I was born and trained for. She met his gaze directly. But I've also come to value Issei Hyodo, the person. The balance between human and divine will be your greatest challenge, and perhaps your greatest strength. The honesty in her answer created a moment of connection between them that transcended priestess and deity, teacher and student. For a brief instant, they were simply two people standing in the moonlight, bound by shared experience and growing understanding. The moment was broken by the distant sound of a phone ringing. Akeno retrieved her cell from where she'd left it inside the shrine. It's late, she said after checking the screen. We should get you home before your parents become concerned. They left the shrine together, making their way down the stone steps in comfortable silence. The night air was cool against Issei's skin, carrying the lingering scent of ozone from their battle. Will you be safe here alone? Issei asked as they reached the bottom of the steps. What if the hunters return? The shrine has protections beyond what you've seen, Akeno assured him, and I have centuries of priesthood knowledge at my disposal. A small smile curved her lips. Besides, they'll be following you, not me. You're the prize they seek. That's not comforting, Issei remarked dryly. It wasn't meant to be, she replied. It was meant to be truthful. You need to remain vigilant, especially when I'm not with you. They walked toward the residential district where Issei lived, the streets nearly empty at this late hour. As they turned a corner, Akeno suddenly stopped, her expression sharpening. We're being followed, she murmured. Her voice barely audible. Issei extended his divine senses, feeling for electrical patterns in their vicinity. He detected a subtle disturbance several blocks behind them. A presence moving with deliberate stealth. Another hunter? He asked quietly. No, Akeno replied, relaxing slightly. Different energy signature. Familiar, actually. A hint of amusement entered her voice. It seems we've acquired a devil shadow. Focusing more carefully, Issei recognized the presence, the distinctive pattern he'd sensed earlier at the shrine. Tsubaki. Indeed, the sea tree sea. Land takes its monitoring responsibilities quite seriously. Akeno continued walking, apparently unconcerned by their observer. Though I suspect her interest isn't entirely official. What do you mean? Devils are naturally drawn to power, Akeno explained. Particularly power that resonates with their own nature. Tsubaki has significant spiritual sensitivity. It's what makes her valuable to the Student Council for detection work. She glanced at Issei with subtle humor. Your awakening divine essence would be particularly interesting to someone with her specific talents. Like a mathematic prodigy discovering a new form of equation. The analogy was oddly fitting. Issei had noticed Tsubaki's analytical approach, the way she'd studied him with intellectual curiosity rather than fear or aggression. Should we let her know we've detected her? He asked. Unnecessary, Akeno replied. She's maintaining a respectful distance, simply observing. It's actually a beneficial arrangement. An extra layer of security for your journey home. As they approached his neighborhood, Issei felt a strange reluctance to end their time together. Despite the danger and strangeness of the day's events, he'd found an unexpected comfort in Akeno's presence. Her calm guidance through the chaos of his awakening divinity had become an anchor he was reluctant to release. What happens tomorrow? He asked as they paused at the corner of his street. We meet with the Occult Research Club as scheduled, Akeno replied. Rias Grimori should be finished with her territorial negotiations by then. Having devil allies will be valuable, especially given tonight's events. She hesitated, then added, after school, return to the shrine. Bring training clothes and prepare for a longer session. Tonight's attack changes our timeline. We need to accelerate your combat readiness. Issei nodded, his mind already mapping out excuses to give his parents for his extended absence. I'll be there. They stood for a moment in comfortable silence, neither quite ready to part. Finally, Akeno reached out, her fingers lightly touching the center of Issei's chest where his divine essence was strongest. Reem, MBER to cycle your energy as I showed you, she instructed. Keep your divine signature dampened, especially while sleeping. That's when hunters often strike. The touch sent pleasant resonances through Issei's divine core, their energies harmonizing in ways that felt significant beyond the physical contact. I will, he promised. Akeno withdrew her hand, though the harmonic connection lingered. Good night, Issei Hyodo. Rest well. Quote, Good night, Akeno. As she turned to leave, Issei caught a final glimpse of her profile in the streetlight, elegant, composed, with an underlying strength that went beyond physical capability. In that moment, he understood something fundamental about their relationship. Akeno Himejima was far more than simply a priestess assigned to guide a newly awakened deity. She was a powerful individual in her own right, with her own story and purpose that somehow had become intertwined with his. Walking the final block to his home, Issei remained aware of their devil observer maintaining her discreet distance. Rather than finding Tsubaki's presence intrusive, he felt oddly reassured, another connection forming in what was rapidly becoming a complex web of supernatural relationships. Inside his family home, everything appeared perfectly normal, his parents watching television in the living room, household routines proceeding as they always had. The contrast between this mundane reality and the divine awakening, hunter attacks, and supernatural politics of his day was almost surreal. You're home late, his mother observed as he passed the living room. Study session run long. Yeah, Issei replied, the half-truth coming easily. Got caught up in a project. You seem different lately, she remarked, studying him with maternal perception. More focused. If she only knew how focused he'd become, channeling divine electricity through an ancient Japanese dagger to destroy parasitic hunters required concentration beyond anything he'd previously imagined. Just taking school more seriously, he said with a shrug, hoping his face didn't betray the strangeness of his day. His father glanced up from the television. Good to hear. Though Dawn, burn yourself out. You're looking a bit tired. I'm fine, Issei assured them. Just need some sleep. In his bedroom, Issei practiced the energy cycling technique Akeno had taught him, carefully dampening his divine signature to avoid broadcasting his presence to potential hunters. The process was mentally taxing but grew easier with repetition, his divine essence gradually responding more naturally to his direction. As he prepared for bed, he caught sight of his reflection in the mirror and paused, struck by the subtle changes Akeno had mentioned. The physical differences were minimal, perhaps a slightly more defined musculature, a certain intensity in his eyes that hadn't been there before, but the alteration in his bearing was unmistakable. He stood differently, moved differently, Aried himself with an unconscious confidence that the previous days Issei would have found foreign. The human boy is becoming the god of thunder, he murmured, recalling Akeno's words. The transformation should have frightened him more than it did. Instead, he felt a growing acceptance, even anticipation. The divine essence awakening within him didn't feel like an invasion or replacement of his identity, rather. It seemed to be revealing aspects of himself that had always existed beneath the surface, waiting for the proper catalyst to emerge. Outside his window, a subtle flicker of movement caught his attention. Extending his senses, Issei detected Tsubaki's presence taking up position on a nearby rooftop, close enough to monitor but maintaining respectful distance. The Devil Vice President was apparently taking her security assignment seriously. With a small smile, Issei closed his curtains and completed his preparations for sleep. Despite the dangers revealed by the day's events, he felt strangely at peace. His path forward was uncertain and undoubtedly perilous, but no longer undefined. Tomorrow would bring new challenges: the meeting with Rias Grimori's Occult Research Club, further training with Akeno, and inevitably, more supernatural complications. But for tonight, in this moment, Issei Hyodo, human student and awakening thunder god, allowed himself to simply rest. His last thought before drifting to sleep was of Akeno's touch and the harmonic resonance their energies had created. That connection felt significant in ways he couldn't yet articulate, a foundation for something that transcended the traditional relationship between deity and priestess. Whatever tomorrow brought, they would face it together. Chapter 2 and Chapter 3, Divine Politics. Morning Lee. GHT slanted through classroom windows as Issei tried to focus on the mathematics lecture. Numbers and equations blurred before his eyes, his attention repeatedly drawn to the electrical patterns flowing through the building's wiring. The bioelectrical signatures of his classmates, and the subtle atmospheric charges gathering outside. Since his awakening, ordinary perception had become layered with divine awareness that made concentrating on mundane subjects increasingly difficult. "Hyodo-kun," called the teacher, her voice cutting through his distraction. "Perhaps you'd like to solve this equation for the class." Issei blinked, focusing on the complex formula written across the blackboard. Before his awakening, such a problem would have left him stammering in embarrassment. Now, the mathematical relationships seemed oddly familiar, reminiscent of the energy patterns Akeno had taught him to manipulate. X equals -3 plus or minus the square root of 13, all divided by 2, he answered without hesitation. Surprise flickered across the teacher's face. "That's correct. Very good, Hyodo-kun." Whispers rippled through the classroom. Issei had never been a stellar student, particularly in mathematics. His sudden aptitude drew curious glances from classmates who'd previously paid him little attention. He noticed Matsuda and Motohama staring at him with suspicious concern. His relationship with his friends had grown strained since his awakening. He'd missed their usual meetups, declined invitations to their typical hijinks, and generally withdrawn from their shared interests in favor of training. When the lunch bell rang, Issei gathered his things quickly, hoping to avoid uncomfortable questions. Too late. Matsuda intercepted him at the doorway, Motohama close behind. "Dude, what's going on with you?" Matsuda demanded. "First you're hanging out with Himejima-senpai, then that foreign transfer shows up asking for you specifically, and now you're solving equations like some kind of math genius. Did you make some kind of deal with the devil?" Motohama adjusted his glasses accusingly. The irony of that particular question wasn't lost on Issei. "It's nothing," he deflected. "Just studying more, trying to get my act together." "For 3 days, Matsuda pressed skeptically. "People don't change overnight, unless they awaken as thunder deities," Issei thought but didn't say. "I've got a meeting to get to," he said instead, edging toward the door. "I'll catch up with you guys later, okay?" Not waiting for their response, he slipped into the hallway, feeling a pang of guilt at the distance growing between himself and his old friends. Akeno had warned him that divine awakening would change his relationships, but experiencing it firsthand was more difficult than he'd anticipated. The Occult Research Club occupied the old school building, a Victorian-style structure separate from the main campus. As Issei approached, he sensed multiple supernatural presences inside, different types of energy signatures, none fully human. His divine perception identified devils predominantly, but also something else, something with energy that resonated oddly with his own. At the entrance, he hesitated, suddenly uncertain. Yesterday he'd battled chimera hunters, today he was about to enter political negotiations with devil aristocracy. Nothing in his previous life had prepared him for this new reality. Taking a deep breath, he centered himself as Akeno had taught him, cycling his divine energy to maintain control without completely dampening his presence. This meeting would require the right balance, projecting enough power to command respect without appearing threatening. He knocked on the ornate wooden door, which swung open almost immediately. A handsome blonde boy about Issei's age stood in the doorway, his smile welcoming though his eyes held careful assessment. "Hyodo-kun," he greeted warmly. "I'm Yuto Kiba. Please, come in. They're expecting you." Issei recognized the name. Kiba was somewhat famous at Kuo Academy, admired by female students and generally respected by males for his combination of athletic prowess and courteous demeanor. What Issei hadn't known until this moment was that Kiba's pleasant exterior concealed a supernatural nature. His energy signature marked him clearly as a devil. "Thanks," Issei replied, following Kiba into an elegantly appointed room that resembled an old-world gentleman's club more than a high school club space. Several people awaited him inside. Akeno stood near an ornate desk, her school uniform immaculate, her expression warming slightly at his arrival. Beside her sat a striking young woman with long crimson hair, Rias Gramori, Issei presumed, given her command. Presence and the subtle aura of authority surrounding her. Tsubaki Shinra stood by the window, her posture formal as always, accompanied by a petite girl with short black hair and red-framed glasses who could only be Sona Citri. Their similar energy signatures marked them as devils of the same clan, though Sona's power felt more concentrated, more refined. And there, standing apart with perfect military posture, was Rossweiss. Unlike yesterday, she now wore a Kuo Academy teacher's uniform, though her silver hair and Nordic features still made her stand out dramatically. Her energy resonated with Issei's divine essence in a way that suggested distant kinship, not identical, but derived from related sources. "Issei Hyodo," announced Rias Gramori, rising gracefully from her seat. "Welcome to the Occult Research Club. I apologize for postponing our meeting yesterday." "No problem," Issei replied, feeling strangely underdressed despite wearing the same uniform as most others present. "I appreciate you making time." Rias gestured to an empty seat positioned conspicuously at the center of the arrangement, placing Issei at the focal point of the gathering. "Please, join us. We have much to discuss." As Issei took the offered seat, he noticed the careful positioning of everyone else in the room. Akeno stood slightly behind and to his right, close enough to show association but maintaining her distinct role. The devils had arranged themselves opposite him, while Rossweiss remained at a neutral distance, representing Asgardian interests without directly aligning with either faction. "I understand congratulations are in order," Rias began with diplomatic precision. "Divine awakening is a rare and significant event." "Thank you," Issei responded, uncertain of the proper protocol. "It's still very new to me." Quote, "Understandably so." Rias smiled, though her eyes remained evaluative. Few mortals experience such transformation. Even fewer survive it intact. Sona Citri adjusted her glasses. The gesture reminiscent of her vice president. "Tsubaki informs me you've already encountered hunters. Chimeras, specifically." "Yes, last night at the shrine," Issei confirmed, glancing briefly at Akeno. "We managed to eliminate 3 of them." "Impressive for one day of training," Rossweiss commented, speaking for the first time. Her voice carried a slight Nordic accent that gave her words crisp definition. "Especially against amalgamated hunters." Something in her tone, assessment mixed with approval, reminded Issei of military officers he'd seen in films, evaluating a promising recruit. "Himejima-san is an excellent teacher," he replied, deliberately crediting Akeno to establish their connection. Rias's eyes flickered between them, noting the implied partnership. "Indeed, the Sacred Order of Thunder maintains traditions that even Asgard has partially forgotten." "Traditional methods have their place," Rossweiss acknowledged diplomatically. "But modern, divine training incorporates techniques from multiple pantheons, optimized through centuries of research." Akeno's posture shifted subtly. "The Order's methods are specifically tailored to Thunder divinity. General divine training lacks the specialized focus needed for proper elemental alignment." Issei sensed the underlying currents, polite words masking territorial claims on his development. He remained silent, observing the dynamic as factions positioned themselves. "Perhaps," Sona Citri interjected, her voice calm but carrying undeniable authority. We should clarify the purpose of this gathering before proceeding further. She turned her analytical gaze to Issei. You have awakened as a thunder deity within territory governed by devil houses under the modern supernatural accords. While ancient shrine grounds provide certain exemptions, your divine influence extends beyond those boundaries. What Sona means, Rias translated with a warmer tone, is that we need to establish RMAL protocols for your presence in Kuo. Not restrictions, but rather mutual understanding of boundaries and responsibilities. I understand, Issei said, though in truth, the complexities of supernatural politics remained largely opaque to him. What exactly would that involve? Rossweiss stepped forward slightly. From the Asgardian perspective, newly awakened thunder divinity falls under Pantheon's guidance by historical precedent. Thor's domain encompasses all thunder deities by divine hierarchy. An outdated claim, Akeno countered smoothly. The Accords of 1908 explicitly GNIZED independent thunder lineages outside Asgardian oversight. A technicality, Rossweiss replied, given that those lineages were presumed extinct. The re-emergence of thunder divinity naturally reverts to established hierarchies. Tension crackled in the air, literally, as Issei's divine essence responded to the escalating conflict, causing small static discharges to manifest around his fingers. He took a centering breath. Regaining control. I appreciate everyone's interest, he said, surprising himself with his measured tone, but I'm still figuring out what being a thunder deity actually means. I'm not ready to pledge allegiance to any pantheon or faction. Rias smiled, seemingly pleased by his response. A wise position. Divine essence should develop its own nature before accepting external governance. Unfortunately, Sona noted, independence isn't practical given current circumstances. The hunter attack yesterday confirms that your awakening has drawn attention. Without formal protection, you become a target for multiple hostile entities. Precisely why Asgardian oversight is necessary, Rossweiss asserted. We offer not just training but security, resources to protect developing divinity until it reaches self-sustaining status. And what does Asgard expect in return? Issei asked directly. The blunt question momentarily disrupted the diplomatic atmosphere. Rossweiss's expression showed brief surprise before settling into professional respect. Allegiance, she answered honestly. Not servitude, but acknowledgement of the Asgardian Pantheon's authority in thunder domains. Participation in divine councils. Occasional service when circumstances require collective action. Issei considered this. And the devil's interest. What does Kuo Academy get from hosting a thunder god? Rias and Sona exchanged glances before Rias responded. Stability. Balanced power maintains supernatural equilibrium in this territory. Your presence, properly integrated, strengthens rather than disrupts our established order. Provided that presence respects established boundaries, Sona added pointedly. The subtext was clear, they would tolerate his divine status as long as he didn't challenge devil authority within their domain. A containment strategy disguised as alliance. Throughout this exchange, Akeno had remained unusually quiet, observing with careful attention. Now she stepped forward slightly. The Sacred Order offers a third option, she stated. Independent development under traditional guidance, maintaining balance between pantheons rather than allegiance to any single faction. Rossweiss frowned. The Order lacks resources for proper protection. Yesterday's hunter attack demonstrates the immediate risks. One attack, successfully repelled, Akeno countered. And the Order maintains alliances beyond what is generally known. This statement caused subtle reactions throughout the room, raised eyebrows from Rossweiss, a calculating look from Sona, and renewed interest from Rias. Clearly, Akeno had introduced new information that altered the political calculation. Hiba, who had been silent until now, spoke up unexpectedly. Hey, Raps were approaching this incorrectly. Rather than competing for Hyodo-kun's allegiance, we might consider collaborative oversight, a council representing multiple interests. Issei felt a surge of gratitude toward the blonde devil. Hiba's suggestion offered a diplomatic compromise that might satisfy all parties while preserving his autonomy. An interesting proposal, Rias mused, considering the idea. Unconventional, but potentially workable. Asgard would require primary position in any such arrangement, Rossweiss stated firmly. Thunder divinity falls within our ancestral domain. Before the negotiation could continue, a sharp change in atmospheric pressure caught Issei's attention. His divine senses detected a disturbance forming outside, not weather-related, but something pushing against the natural electromagnetic field surrounding the school. From Akeno's sudden alertness, he could tell she sensed it too. "Something's coming," he said, rising to his feet as his divine essence responded automatically to potential threat. Rossweiss moved with military precision to the window, her expression sharpening as she scanned the sky. Multiple signatures approaching from the northeast. Not hunters, something else. The others responded with practiced efficiency, political differences temporarily set aside in the face of external threat. Rias moved to the center of the room, a crimson magical circle forming beneath her feet as she activated defensive measures. Sona and Tsubaki positioned themselves at strategic points, creating a coordinated defense grid that Issei could sense through the electrical patterns in the air. Divine Sentinels, Akeno identified, her voice tense. Automated constructs designed to locate and assess divine manifestations. Asgardian, Issei asked, glancing at Rossweiss. The silver-haired Valkyrie shook her head. Not ours. Different construction pattern, likely Greek origin. Olympian interference, Sona stated flatly. Unexpected and unwelcome. Outside, the disturbance intensified. Through the window, Issei caught glimpses of metallic forms descending from cloud cover, humanoid figures with wings of bronze and gold. They are bodies engraved with symbols that pulsed with otherworldly energy. They're scanning for divine signatures, Rossweiss explained quickly. Automated scout units. If they identify awakening divinity, they'll attempt to place a tracking marker for their pantheon. Can they enter devil territory without permission? Issei asked, already suspecting the answer. Technically no, Rias replied grimly. But territorial violations with plausible deniability have become increasingly common as Pantheon's position for the coming realignment. There was no time to ask what realignment meant. 3. Sentinel constructs had descended to hover outside the club building, their featureless metal faces oriented toward the windows. Energy pulses emanated from their forms, probing the structure's defenses. They've detected you, Akeno said to Issei. Their scanning patterns are focusing on thunder resonance. Rossweiss stepped forward, authority evident in her bearing. We need to repel them before they can place a marker. Once tagged, removing Olympian tracking requires diplomatic procedures that could take months. This is devil territory, Rias stated firmly. We have primary response authority. Against divine constructs, Rossweiss countered. Asgardian countermeasures would be more effective. As they debated jurisdiction, Issei felt a strange resonance building within his divine core. The Sentinels, scanning energy was interacting with his thunder essence, creating a harmonic pattern that felt simultaneously invasive and familiar, as though part of him recognized their divine origin despite their hostile intent. The sensation triggered something instinctive. Without conscious decision, Issei stepped forward, divine energy rising to the surface. Electricity crackled along his skin as he extended his perception toward the nearest sentinel. Issei, wait, Akeno began, but he was already establishing connection. Through his divine senses, Issei perceived the sentinel's internal structure, layers of divine craftsmanship, magical circuits, and power sources derived from celestial bronze and captured lightning. At its core lay a simple command matrix: locate, identify, mark, report. But the lightning powering the construct, that spoke to him directly. It was thunder energy, captured and bound to unwilling service, distantly related to his own divine essence. With instinctive precision, Issei reached for that connection, his consciousness extending beyond physical boundaries to touch the imprisoned lightning within the sentinel. I see you, he whispered, though not aloud. You're not meant for this. The sentinel's scanning pattern faltered as Issei's divine essence resonated with its power source. The lightning within recognized kinship, responding to his call with increasing agitation. Issei felt Akeno's hand on his shoulder, her energy harmonizing with his, strengthening the connection. The binding pattern, she murmured. Third sigil from the center. Understanding immediately, Issei focused his attention on the identified point, a nexus where divine commands controlled the captured lightning. With surgical precision, he sent a pulse of his own thunder essence through the connection, disrupting the binding pattern. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The sentinel convulsed in midair, its bronze wings beating erratically as the lightning within fought for freedom. Golden light poured from seams in its metallic body as containment began to fail. Seeing this, the other two sentinels abandoned their scanning patterns and moved to intercept, apparently programmed to protect damaged units. But the disruption had already cascaded. The freed lightning within the first sentinel reached out to its imprisoned kin, Issei's divan. E-signature serving as catalyst for their communication. "They're destabilizing," Rossweiss warned, moving protectively toward the window. "Olympian constructs detonate when compromised." Rias's crimson power flared around the building, reinforcing the structure's defenses. "Everyone down." The first sentinel exploded in a blinding flash of gold and blue, fragments of celestial bronze raining down across the school grounds. The shockwave rattled windows and triggered car alarms throughout the neighborhood. The remaining sentinels, now fully alert to the threat, abandoned their mission parameters. One launched skyward, presumably to report back to its creators, while the other initiated what appeared to be an offensive protocol, its arms transforming into elaborate weapons that crackled with captured divine energy. "That's not supposed to happen," Rossweiss muttered, genuine concern in her voice. "Scout units aren't combat-equipped. These have been modified," Sona observed clinically. Interesting escalation from Olympus. The sentinel oriented toward the club room window, its weapons charging with ominous intensity. Before it could fire, however, a blur of motion intercepted it. Kiba, moving with supernatural speed, had launched himself through a side window. His sword, materializing in his hand from apparently nowhere, sliced through one of the sentinel's bronze wings with precision. The construct faltered, its flight pattern disrupted but weapons still charging. Energy gathered at the focusing points of its transformed arms, preparing to discharge despite its damage. "Kiba, clear," Akeno called out, her hands already tracing complex patterns in the air. The blonde devil leapt clear just as lightning struck downward from clear sky, connecting with the sentinel. But rather than destroying it, Akeno's strike served as a conduit, a pathway Issei instinctively recognized. Without hesitation, he channeled his divine essence through the lightning path she had created, connecting directly to the captured thunder energy within the sentinel. This time, rather than merely disrupting the binding pattern, he called to the imprisoned power. "Return," he commanded, his voice resonating with divine authority. "Return to the sky." The sentinel's structure couldn't contain the sudden surge as its power source responded to Issei's call. Lightning erupted from every seam and joint, not explosive but directed, flowing upward along the path Akeno had established, returning to the atmosphere from which it had been harvested. Within seconds, the sentinel was not but an empty shell of celestial bronze, which dropped lifelessly to the ground below. In the sudden quiet that followed, Issei became aware of everyone staring at him. The room's atmosphere had shifted significantly, political positioning temporarily forgotten in the face of his unexpected display of divine ability. That, Rossweiss said with professional admiration, was not basic thunder manipulation. That was divine communion with kindred essence. An ability usually seen only in mature deities, Rias added, her expression showing new calculation. "How did you know you could communicate with the captured lightning?" Issei looked to Akeno, unsure how to explain the instinctive connection he'd felt. "I didn't know, exactly. It just called to me, like it was asking for help." "Because it was," Akeno explained. "Olympian sentinels are powered by harvested divine energy, thunder essence captured during storms and bound to service through celestial engineering. You sensed its imprisoned nature, and freed it," Sona noted thoughtfully, "without destroying the surrounding area, despite your limited training." Most interesting. The political dynamic in the room had subtly transformed. Where before they had been negotiating over a promising but unproven divine awakening, now they were reassessing their approach to a deity who had demonstrated unexpected capability. Rossweiss was the first to directly address the implications. "The Olympians will know their sentinels were neutralized. They'll be aware of your presence now, and your affinity for their captured storm energy." "Is that bad?" Issei asked, still processing what he'd done. "Complicated," Rias answered diplomatically. "Zeus is territorial regarding thunder domains. Historically, he's either recruited or eliminated potential competition. The diplomatic situation just became more urgent," Sona stated, her analytical mind already adapting to new circumstances. "We need formal protection." Agreements in place before Olympian representatives arrive. Issei felt the political vice tightening again, multiple factions seeing his actions as justification for accelerating their claims on his allegiance. Before he could respond, however, Akeno stepped forward decisively. "We should continue this discussion after school hours," she suggested, her tone making it clear this wasn't merely a suggestion. "The Sentinels' destruction will have drawn attention from regular students. Maintaining supernatural secrecy requires managing the aftermath." Rias nodded, acknowledging the practical concern. "Agreed. We'll reconvene at the shrine after containment measures are complete." "The shrine?" Rossweiss questioned, her tone carefully neutral though her disapproval was evident. "Neutral ground," Kiba suggested, returning through the window with impressive composure for someone who had just battled a divine construct. "The shrine predates current territorial agreements and has recognized autonomy under the Accords." The compromise was reluctantly accepted by all parties. As the meeting dispersed, with Devils moving to manage the aftermath of the Sentinel incident, Issei found himself momentarily alone with Akeno. "That was incredible," she said quietly, genuine admiration in her voice. "Most thunder deities require decades to develop communion abilities with kindred essence." "It didn't feel difficult," Issei admitted. "It was like recognizing a distant relative who needed help." Akeno's violet eyes studied him with newfound interest. "Your divine essence is manifesting along unusual patterns. The ability to perceive and communicate with captured thunder energy suggests a naturally protective aspect to your divinity." "Is that significant?" "Very. Divine domains aren't just about power types, they're about fundamental purpose." She brushed a strand of hair from her face, a rare gesture of casual movement from the usually composed priestess. "A protective tune. Der deity would align differently in pantheon politics than a destructive one." Before she could elaborate, Rossweiss approached, her professional demeanor firmly in place though her eyes betrayed genuine curiosity. "Hyodo-san," she addressed him formally, "Asgard will need a complete report on your interaction with the Olympian constructs. The specific resonance pattern you established could have significant implications for interpantheon relations." "I'm not sure I could explain it technically," Issei admitted. "It was mostly instinctive." "Even better," Rossweiss replied, surprising him. "Unfiltered divine responses provide more valuable data than intellectualized explanations." She glanced at Akeno. "The priestess can provide the technical framework for your experience." Though her words were directed at Issei, the subtext was clear. Rossweiss was establishing her authority to request information while acknowledging Akeno's technical expertise, a carefully calibrated diplomatic position. "We'll prepare a proper account for tonight's meeting," Akeno replied with equal diplomatic precision. With a crisp nod, Rossweiss departed, leaving Issei and Akeno in momentary privacy. "She's intense," Issei observed once the Valkyrie was out of earshot. "Valkyries are the military elite of Asgard," Akeno explained. "Their entire existence is dedicated to divine service and strategic preparation. Rossweiss is actually considered unusually flexible by their standards." "That's flexible." Issei couldn't hide his disbelief. A small smile curved Akeno's lips. "You should meet the traditional ones sometime. They make Rossweiss seem positively casual." The school bell rang, signaling the end of lunch period. Students would be returning to classrooms soon, unaware of the divine confrontation that had occurred on campus grounds. "We should get back," Akeno said, her expression becoming serious again. "And you should practice energy dampening throughout the afternoon. After the Sentinel incident, other detection systems may be scanning for your signature." "Will there be more attacks?" Issei asked, suddenly concerned for the safety of ordinary students caught in supernatural crossfire. "Not attacks, precisely," Akeno corrected. "The Sentinels weren't designed to harm, only to identify and mark. But their presence indicates increased pantheon interest in this territory." She touched his arm briefly, the contact sending harmonic resonances through his divine core. "Be cautious, Issei. Divine politics are accelerating around you." With that warning, Hei parted ways, Akeno to her third-year classroom, Issei to face the remainder of a school day that felt increasingly disconnected from his new reality. Afternoon classes passed in a blur of moon. Dane subjects that failed to engage Issei's divinely enhanced perception. He maintained the energy dampening technique as Akeno had instructed, though the effort of constraining his thunder essence Issei simultaneously appearing to pay attention to lectures left him mentally exhausted. When the final bell rang, he gathered his things quickly, hoping to avoid another confrontation with Matsuda and Motohama. As he left the classroom, however, he found Kiba waiting in the hallway. "Hyodo-kun," the blonde devil greeted pleasantly. "If you have a moment." Curious about the unexpected approach, Issei nodded. "Sure, what's up? I thought you might appreciate company on your way to the shrine," Kiba explained as they walked together through the crowded hallway. The Sentinel incident has drawn attention throughout the supernatural community. Better not to travel alone. The offer seemed genuinely helpful rather than politically motivated. "Thanks," Issei said, meaning it. "I appreciate that." As they left the school building, Issei noticed subtle differences in how other students perceived them. Curious glances, whispered comments, even a few jealous looks from boys who considered Kiba's popularity their rightful domain. Walking alongside the school's prince had instantly altered Issei's social standing in ways he found both amusing and uncomfortable. "You're handling the transition remarkably well," Kiba commented as they crossed the school grounds. Divine awakening is traumatic for most recipients. Many lose themselves entirely to their divine aspect. "I don't feel like I'm losing myself," Issei replied thoughtfully. "More like discovering parts that were always there but dormant." Kiba nodded. "That's the ideal integration pattern. When divine essence finds true compatibility with its vessel, the transformation enhances rather than overwrites." "You seem to know a lot about this," Issei observed. "Devil Society studies divine processes closely," Kiba explained. "Our own evolution from human to devil follows similar patterns, though through different metaphysical mechanisms." Something in his tone, a personal understanding beyond academic knowledge, caught Issei's attention. "You were human once. Most devils were, originally," Kiba confirmed. "Pure-blood devils like Rias and Sona are increasingly rare. The rest of us began as humans who underwent transformation through various means." This revelation shifted Issei's understanding of the supernatural hierarchy. He'd assumed devils were entirely separate beings, fundamentally different from humanity. Learning that many had once been human-like himself created unexpected common ground. "What was it like?" he asked. "Your transformation." A shadow crossed Kiba's handsome features. "Different from yours. Less natural." He seemed about to elaborate, then visibly reconsidered. "Perhaps a story for another time. We all have our pasts." Respecting the boundary, Issei changed the subject. "So what's your take on all this pantheon politics? Everyone seems to have very strong opinions about what I should do." "Of course they do," Kiba replied with a hint of wry humor. "Divine essence represents power, and power attracts politics like flowers attract bees. Especially thunder divinity, which has historically held significant influence across multiple pantheons." They turned onto the path leading toward the shrine, leaving the more populated areas behind. Issei sensed Kiba subtly scanning their surroundings, maintaining security awareness without being obvious about it. "If you want my personal opinion," Kiba continued after ensuring they weren't overheard, "maintain your independence as long as possible. Once you formally align with any faction, your options narrow considerably." "Is that what you did?" Issei asked. "Stay independent." Kiba smiled, though something in his eyes suggested deeper complexities. "My circumstances were different. I had reasons for choosing Devil Society." He glanced at Issei with unexpected seriousness. "You, however, have multiple viable paths. That's rare and valuable. Don't surrender it hastily." The advice seemed genuinely meant, lacking the political agenda that had colored similar counsel from others. Issei found himself appreciating Kiba's straightforward approach. Whatever the devil's personal history might be, he appeared to have no immediate designs on Issei's divine essence. "Thanks," Issei said simply. "It's nice getting advice that doesn't come with strings attached." Kiba laughed softly. "I wouldn't go that far. Everything in supernatural politics has strings, I'm just not pulling them at the moment." As they approached the shrine steps, Issei detected multiple presences already gathered at the top, the familiar electrical signature of Akeno, the controlled power of the devil representatives, and the distinct resonance of Roswice's Asgardian energy. "Looks like everyone beat us here," he observed. Kiba nodded. "The continuation of interrupted negotiations is considered high priority," especially after the Sentinel incident. All parties will be eager to establish formal protocols before Olympian representatives appear. How long do we have before that happens? Diplomatic channels typically require 72 hours for formal response, Kiba explained. But unofficial envoys could arrive sooner, particularly if Zeus takes personal interest in a new thunder deity. The prospect of facing the king of Olympian gods sent an uncomfortable charge through Issei's divine core. He'd barely begun to understand his own abilities. Confronting an ancient, established deity of the same domain seemed premature at best, potentially catastrophic at worst. As they climbed the shrine steps, Issei practiced the centering technique Akeno had taught him, stabilizing his divine essence to project calm confidence rather than nervous anticipation. By the time they reached the Torii gate, he had achieved reasonable composure. His thunder energy cycling smoothly beneath conscious control. The gathering awaited them in the shrine's main courtyard rather than the interior building. Rias and Sona had positioned themselves on one side, with Tsubaki standing slightly behind her president. Rosweiss occupied the opposite position, maintaining formal distance that symbolized Asgard's separate interests from devil politics. Akeno stood at the center, her Miko attire marking her role as both host and representative of the sacred order. Her expression remained professionally composed, though Issei detected subtle tension in her electrical field. Issei Hyodo, Rias greeted as he and Kiba passed through the Torii gate. Thank you for joining us. We have much to discuss following this afternoon's incident. Indeed, Rosweiss agreed, stepping forward. Asgard has received preliminary reports about the Sentinel confrontation. The Olympian Council is already demanding explanation for destruction of their constructs in Devil territory. Technically, Akeno interjected smoothly, the Sentinels were neutralized by Thunder Divinity defending itself against unauthorized scanning. A legitimate response under the non-interference clauses of the Divine Accords. Sona adjusted her glasses precisely. A defensible position legally, but one that still requires formal documentation. Without established protectorate status, Hyodo-san's divine actions fall into a problematic gray area. Which brings us back to our original discussion, Rias concluded, returning to the central issue with diplomatic focus. Issei requires formal standing within the supernatural political framework, for his protection and for territorial stability. The conversation was progressing along familiar lines, but Issei sensed subtle differences in their approaches. The Sentinel incident had altered their assessment of his potential value, elevating the stakes of his allegiance. Before we continue, he said, stepping forward slightly, I'd like to understand something more clearly. Everyone keeps talking about protection and training, but what exactly am I being protected from? What's Act 2, ally happening in the supernatural world that makes my awakening so politically significant? His direct question created a moment of silence as the gathered representatives exchanged glances, apparently weighing how much to reveal. Surprisingly, it was Rosweiss who answered with unvarnished truth. The divine realms are approaching a critical transition point. Power balances established after the last great supernatural war are destabilizing as ancient bindings weaken. The eternal seals are failing, Akeno elaborated, her expression grave. Primordial entities imprisoned since before human civilization are showing signs of renewed activity. Their influence is already affecting vulnerable supernatural systems. The Divine Detection Grid has reported a 17% increase in chaotic manifestations over the past decade, Sona added with clinical precision. Particularly in thunder domains, which serve as natural conduits for primordial energy. Which is why your awakening attracts such attention. Rias concluded, a new thunder deity emerging at this particular moment seems suspiciously convenient, either a natural response to growing threat or potentially a manifest Asian influenced by primordial resurgence. The implications settled heavily on Issei's shoulders. His divine awakening wasn't merely a personal transformation or political inconvenience, it potentially represented part of a cosmic response to existential threat. So everyone wants to make sure I'm on their side if these primordials break free, he summarized, understanding the underlying motivations more clearly. Not quite so simple, Kiba corrected gently. Each faction has different theories about what your awakening represents and how best to develop your potential. The approaches vary significantly. Asgard believes thunder deities serve as natural wardens against primordial chaos, Rosweiss explained. Our training would emphasize combat readiness and defensive applications of your divine essence. Devil houses prioritize stability and balance, Rias countered. We would focus on integration of your divine energy with existing supernatural frameworks to strengthen current containment measures. And the order? Issei asked, turning to Akeno. We believe thunder divinity represents natural counterpoint to primordial energies, she replied. Not merely warriors or stabilizers, but transformative forces capable of channeling and redirecting primordial influence rather than simply opposing it. Each approach reflected fundamentally different worldviews and strategic assessments. Issei found himself drawn to Akeno's perspective, not just because of their personal connection, but because it resonated with his instinctive understanding of his developing abilities. I need time to consider, he said finally. This is bigger than I realized. Time is precisely what we lack, Rossweiss stated firmly. The Sentinel incident accelerates all timelines. Oli, MPE and representatives will demand immediate classification of your divine status. Then let's give them one, Akeno suggested unexpectedly. All eyes turned to her as she continued, we declare Issei under the protection of the Sacred Order of Thunder, with mutual defense agreements from both Devil territories and Asgardian interests. The proposal was bold, essentially creating a new political category that acknowledged all claims without granting primacy to any single faction. Unprecedented, Sona noted, though her tone suggested analytical interest rather than rejection. Asgard would require specific terms regarding Thunder domain hierarchy, Rossweiss stated, already moving to negotiation rather than outright refusal. As would the Devil houses regarding territorial jurisdiction, Rias added, similarly engaged with the concept rather than dismissing it. Issei watched in amazement as Akeno's suggestion transformed the conversation from competitive positioning to collaborative problem-solving. Within minutes, they were discussing specific terms, responsibilities, and protocols that would define his unique status. The Order will maintain primary training authority, Akeno asserted, establishing her non-negotiable condition, with supplementary instruction from both Asgardian and Devil representatives as appropriate. Asgard requires consultation rights on all Thunder domain manifestations, Rossweiss countered, and priority access during primordial containment scenarios. Devil territories maintain veto authority over divine actions within established boundaries, Sona added, with emergency exceptions clearly defined and limited. As the negotiation continued, Issei found himself impressed by Akeno's diplomatic skill. She had effectively transformed Ompeting claims into a shared framework that preserved his autonomy while acknowledging the legitimate interests of all parties. The discussion might have continued indefinitely if not for a sudden atmospheric change that caught everyone's attention. Issei felt it first, a disturbance in the electromagnetic field surrounding the shrine, similar to what he'd sensed before the Sentinel attack but different in character. This presence felt singular and focused, powerful in a way that made his divine essence respond instinctively. Someone's coming, he said, rising to his feet as electrical energy began to gather around him defensively. Rossweiss moved with military precision to a position near the Torii gate, a glowing Nordic circle appearing beneath her feet as she prepared combat spells. The Devils likewise shifted to defensive postures, magical energy manifesting around Rias's hands in crimson patterns while Sona created intricate blue circles that suggested water-based abilities. Akeno stepped to Issei's side, her own electrical energy harmonizing with his, strengthening both. A powerful presence, she confirmed. Divine in nature, but not Olympian. The disturbance intensified, culminating in a flash of brilliant light at the shrine entrance. When it faded, a single figure stood beyond the Torii gate, a striking woman with silver-white hair and ceremonial robes that seemed to shift between solid fabric and mist. Her eyes glowed with inner lightning, marking her unmistakably as a thunder deity. Greetings, kindred, she called, her voice carrying harmonics that resonated with Issei's divine essence. I am Susanoo no Makoto. The name registered immediately, the Japanese god of storms and sea, one of the most prominent deities in Shinto mythology. Her appearance was unexpected and significant, representing an entirely different pantheon than those already involved in negotiations. Susanoo-sama, Akeno responded formally, bowing with deep respect. The Sacra D Order welcomes you to this humble shrine. The storm goddess inclined her head slightly, acknowledging the greeting. Her gaze, however, remained fixed on Issei, studying him with ancient eyes that seemed to peer directly into his divine core. "So," she said after a moment, "the rumors are true. Thunder divinity awakens anew in this age of endings." She approached the Torii gate but did not cross the threshold, respecting territorial boundaries with the precision of one who understood their significance. "May I enter this sacred ground?" she requested formally. "I come in peace, seeking discourse with the new spark." "You are welcome," Akeno replied, maintaining protocol despite the extraordinary circumstances. As Susanoo passed through the gate, Issei felt a subtle shift in the Ni's energy field, ancient wards recognizing her divine nature and adjusting accordingly. Unlike the devils or even Rosweiss, whose supernatural essences existed harmoniously alongside the shrine's protections, Susanoo's presence seemed to awaken something within the sacred ground itself. The entire shrine hummed with renewed energy, responding to the presence of an ancient deity for whom such places had originally been built. "Fascinating," the storm goddess murmured, approaching Issei with unhurried grace. "Your divine signature contains elements of multiple thunder traditions, Nordic precision, Japanese volatility, even traces of Vedic complexity." She circled him slowly, her divine senses clearly perceiving aspects of his essence invisible to others. "Yet the foundation is uniquely your own. A true new manifestation, not merely an echo of previous thunder gods." "I'm still learning what that means," Issei admitted, finding honesty easier than pretense before her ancient gaze. Susanoo smiled, the expression transforming her severe features into something almost maternal. "As are we all, young spark. Even after millennia, the divine path remains one of continuous discovery." She turned to address the gathered representatives, her manner shifting to formal diplomacy. "I observe negotiations regarding this new divinity are already underway. Multiple factions staking their claims, as is tradition." Her tone contained subtle amusement, suggesting she found the predictable political maneuvering somewhat tiresome. "Standard protocols for divine manifestation require established oversight," Rosweiss stated, maintaining Asgardian position despite the unexpected development. "Indeed," Susanoo acknowledged, "though perhaps the perspective of an active thunder deity might inform these discussions more meaningfully than theoretical frameworks." The subtle rebuke was delivered with such perfect politeness that it took a moment for Issei to recognize it as criticism. Rosweiss's slight stiffening suggested she hadn't missed the implication. "Japanese pantheon interests have not been represented in these negotiations," Sona noted with analytical precision. "Your arrival alters the political balance considerably." "I do not come representing pantheon interests," Susanoo corrected. "I come as kindred to kindred, storm to storm." She turned back to Issei. 2. Ender divinity exists beyond political boundaries, despite centuries of attempts to categorize and control it. Her statement directly challenged the fundamental assumptions underlying the ongoing negotiations. The representatives exchanged glances, recalculating their positions in light of this new development. "With respect, Susanoo-sama," Rias began diplomatically, "supernatural accords require a formal classification of divine manifestations, particularly those with substantial power potential. Accords created by political entities to manage power they neither fully understand nor control." Susanoo replied with the casual confidence of one who had witnessed countless political systems rise and fall. "But I have not come to disrupt your negotiations, merely to offer perspective from on. Who walks the path this young spark is beginning." She approached Issei again, her divine energy resonating with his in ways that felt instructive rather than invasive, like a master musician demonstrating proper technique to a novice. "You freed captured lightning from Olympian constructs today," she stated rather than asked. "Tell me what you felt when connecting with that imprisoned essence." The direct question caught Issei by surprise. It felt wrong, like something natural had been forced into unnatural purpose. "I could feel its distress." Susanoo nodded, apparently satisfied with his answer. "Thunder essence is not meant for captivity. It exists to flow, to transform, to connect heaven and earth in momentary perfection." She glanced meaningfully at the gathered representatives. "Remember this truth when deciding how to classify this young deity. His nature will resist constraint, regardless of political necessity." The warning was delivered gently but unmistakably. Issei sensed the others absorbing its implications, reassessing their approaches in light of this new perspective. The Sacred Order has always acknowledged the fluid nature of Thunder Divinity, Akeno stated. Aligning her position with Susanoo's perspective. Our proposed arrangement emphasizes guidance rather than constraint. A wise approach, Susanoo approved. And one I would encourage all factions to consider. She turned to Rosweiss. Asgard's rigidity has both strengthened and limited its thunder deities throughout history. Perhaps flexibility would better serve this new manifestation. To the devils, she added. And territorial concerns, while valid, must accommodate the inherently boundary-crossing nature of storm divinity. Lightning does not recognize political borders. Our diplomatic intervention subtly reinforced the compromise framework Akeno had proposed earlier while elevating certain aspects that favored divine autonomy. The representatives, recognizing the value of Susanoo's implicit endorsement, began adjusting their positions accordingly. As negotiations resumed with renewed focus, Susanoo drew Issei slightly apart from the main group. Akeno followed, maintaining her position as his primary guide while acknowledging the storm goddess's seniority. You are fortunate to have a knowledgeable priestess, Susanoo observed, gesturing toward Akeno. The Cred Order preserves traditions many pantheons have forgotten in their quest for modernization. She's been essential, Issei agreed, glancing at Akeno with genuine appreciation. I would have been completely lost without her guidance. Something in his tone or expression caught Susanoo's attention. Her ancient eyes studied them both with renewed interest, perceiving connections beyond the formal priestess-deity relationship. Interesting, she murmured. The resonance pattern between you is unusually harmonious for such a recent awakening. Most thunder deities require decades to establish such synchronicity with their ceremonial counterparts. Akeno's composure faltered slightly, a faint blush coloring her cheeks before she regained control. Issei's divine essence has demonstrated exceptional adaptability in multiple aspects. Indeed, Susanoo agreed, though her knowing smile suggested she perceived more than either of them might wish to acknowledge. Such natural alignment is rare and valuable. It suggests compatibility beyond mere functional harmony. Before this potentially uncomfortable observation could be pursued further, a sudden shift in the shrine's protective field caught everyone's attention. The wards activated with unexpected intensity, responding to an approaching presence that radiated hostility. We have company, Rosweiss announced, her military aiming evident as she moved to defensive position. Multiple signatures approaching rapidly from the south. Issei extended his divine senses, feeling for electrical patterns beyond the shrine boundaries. What he detected sent a chill through his divine core. Chaotic, fragmented signatures similar to the Chimera hunters from the previous night, but more numerous and better organized. Hunters, he identified grimly. More sophisticated than the ones from yesterday. Coordinated attack pattern, Sona observed, magical circles already forming around her hands. Tactical rather than opportunistic. Susanoo's expression darkened, storm energy gathering around her form. Void-touched hunters. I've encountered their kind before. They serve interests beyond mere consumption of divine essence. Void-touched. Akeno questioned sharply. You're certain? Unfortunately, yes. The corruption pattern is distinctive. The storm goddess turned to Issei, her manner shifting from diplomatic to martial. This will be your first true combat as a deity, young spark. Remember, your essence is not merely power but purpose. Intent shapes manifestation. Before Issei could ask for clarification, the first wave of attackers crested the shrine steps, humanoid figures with misshapen features and weapons that glowed with sickly energy. Unlike the relatively primitive chimeras from the previous night, these hunters moved with coordinated precision, spreading out to surround the shrine grounds. Defensive perimeter, Rias commanded, taking charge of tactical response with natural authority. Sona, barrier configurations. Rosweiss, counter-strike preparations. Akeno, shrine protections at full activation. Everyone responded to her directives without hesitation, political differences tempora. Riley set aside in the face of common threat. Issei found himself at the center of their defensive formation, protected from all sides despite his developing combat abilities. I can fight, he asserted. Divine energy already gathering around his hands. Indeed you can, Susanoo agreed, moving to his side. But not as they expect. Watch. The storm goddess raised her hand, and lightning answered. Not striking downward from the sky as Issei had learned, but erupting upward from the earth in spiraling patterns that intercepted the first hunters as they breached the Torii gate. The attack wasn't merely destructive. It was transformative, converting the ground itself into a conductor that carried divine energy in precise, controlled patterns. Thunder divinity isn't limited to calling lightning from above, she explained as the hunters recoiled from this unexpected approach. It encompasses all electrical pathways, earth, water, air, even living systems. Understanding immediately, Issei reached for the electrical potential within the shrine grounds, the subtle currents flowing through soil, stone, and wood. Rather than forcing his divine energy outward, he harmonized with these existing pathways, enhancing and directing their natural patterns. The effect was dramatic but controlled, electrical energy flowing through the shrine's structure like blue-white veins, illuminating NT ward patterns carved into foundation stones long buried beneath the surface. As the hunters advanced, these energized pathways responded to their presence, discharging precisely where they stepped. Excellent, Susano approved. You understand intuitively. The coordinated defense proved effective against the first wave, but more hunters appeared at the shrine steps, their weapons and abilities more varied than the previous group. Some carried devices that seemed designed specifically to disrupt divine energy, while others displayed grafted abilities from multiple supernatural sources. The battle expanded quickly, with each defender employing their unique abilities against the encroaching threat. Rias unleashed devastating crimson energy that disintegrated hunters with pinpoint accuracy. Sona manipulated water with mathematical precision, creating pressurized streams that sliced through corrupted flesh. Rosweiss demonstrated her Valkyrie training with impressive combat spells that combined Norse runes with modern magical theory. Kiba's speed made him nearly invisible as he darted between attackers, his materialized sword cleaving through hunter defenses with supernatural sharpness. Tsubaki revealed her own combat abilities, creating mirror-like barriers that reflected attacks back upon their sources. Amidst this coordinated defense, Akeno's abilities stood out for perfect complementarity with Issei's divine power. Her lightning strikes created pathways that his thunder essence could follow and enhance, while her defensive barriers resonated with his energy to create layered protection that adapted to changing threats. They're targeting you specifically, Akeno called to him as another wave of hunters breached their perimeter. Their attack pattern is focused on separation and isolation. Issei recognized the strategy. The hunters were attempting to drive wedges between defenders, creating opportunities to isolate him from his protectors. Understanding their intent allowed him to counter more effectively, using his developing thunder abilities to maintain connections with his allies rather than simply attacking enemies. As the battle intensified, Issei felt his divine essence responding to the pressure, expanding, adapting, revealing new aspects of its nature. Where previously he had accessed thunder energy through conscious effort, now it flowed naturally, responding to his intentions with increasing sophistication. One hunter, larger and more humanoid than its misshapen companions, broke through their defensive line, charging directly toward Issei with a weapon that appeared designed to extract divine essence. Its blade glowed with sigils specifically configured to interact with thunder energy. Instinctively, Issei met the attack directly, channeling his divine power through his entire body rather than just his hands. Electricity enveloped him in a protective corona that transformed his physical form, not merely surrounding him with energy but temporarily converting his substance into a lightning-like state. The hunter's specialized weapon passed harmlessly through this semi-corporeal form, finding no solid essence to capture or contain. Before the creature could recover from its failed attack, Issei reverted to physical form directly in contact with it, divine energy discharging through the connection with devastating effect. The hunter collapsed, its composite body unable to withstand direct exposure to concentrated thunder essence. As it fell, however, Issei noticed something disturbing. At its core lay not the expected amalgamation of stolen divine fragments, but something darker, more primordial. A void-like emptiness that seemed to absorb light and energy around it. Susano, he called, pointing to the disturbing phenomenon. What is that? The storm goddess dispatched her own opponents with casual efficiency before examining the fallen hunter. Her expression darkened as she studied the void core. Primordial contamination, she confirmed grimly. As I feared, these aren't ordinary hunters. They're vessels for something older, something that predates divine categorization. She gestured to Akeno, who joined them while maintaining a protective barrier around their position. The priestess should witness this. The order has records of similar manifestations from previous cycles. Akeno stud, IED the void core with professional focus, though Issei detected subtle horror in her electrical signature. It matches the descriptions from the third seal breach, she confirmed. Primordial emptine, SS seeking form through composite vessels. What does that mean? Issei asked, maintaining combat awareness even as they conducted this impromptu analysis. It means these hunters aren't simply aft. Your divine essence for consumption or power, Susano explained. They serve as extensions of primordial will, probes seeking to understand and counter emerging divine manifestations before they reach maturity. The implications were disturbing. Not random opportunistic predators, but targeted opposition to his specific awakening. Before Issei could process this fully, however, the battle dynamic shifted dramatically. A new presence entered the shrine grounds, not another hunter, but a young woman with blue-green hair wearing what appeared to be modified church battle attire. In her hands he wielded an enormous sword that radiated holy energy powerful enough to register even to Issei's untrained divine senses. Exorcist, Akeno identified with surprise. Church faction. The newcomer launched herself into the fray with remarkable efficiency, her oversized blade cleaving through hunters with practiced precision. Unlike the defenders already present, her fighting style showed no attempt at containment or analysis, only decisive elimination of threats. Zenobia Quarta, Rossweiss identified between combat spells. Durandal wielder, unexpected ally. The blue-haired warrior Kar vet a path through the hunter ranks with single-minded focus, eventually reaching the central defensive position where Issei, Akeno, and Susano had regrouped. Thunder deity, she addressed Issei directly, her manner blunt and formal. The Vatican Supernatural Division detected primordial contamination in this region. I was dispatched to assess and contain. Her gaze shifted to Susano with evident recognition. Storm Goddess, your presence is noted in official capacity. Despite the battle raging around them, Zenobia maintained remarkable composure, professional, focused, and apparently unimpressed by the gathering of supernatural powers. Her attention returned to Issei, studying him with evaluative intensity. You're the source of the divine awakening, she stated rather than asked. Recently manifested, still developing. Primordial interest confirms significance. Her clipped speech pattern suggested someone focused on efficiency rather than social niceties, a warrior rather than a diplomat. The church has taken interest in my awakening, Issei asked, surprised by this new faction entering the already complex political situation. Primordial containment supersedes jurisdictional conflicts. Zenobia replied simply, divine assets are monitored regardless of pantheon alignment when void contamination is detected. Her straightforward categorization of him as a divine asset was oddly refreshing after the careful diplomatic language of other factions. Before this unusual introduction could continue, however, a coordinated surge from the remaining hunters demanded their attention. Discussion later, Zenobia stated, turning to face the new threat. Combat now. She launched herself back into battle with mechanical precision, her holy sword cleaving through core. Rupted flesh with devastating efficiency. What she lacked in supernatural variety, she compensated for with technical perfection and raw power. With the addition of Zenovia's combat prowess, the defenders gained decisive advantage. The remaining hunters, recognizing their failing position, attempted tactical withdrawal, but Rias's forces had anticipated this, cutting off escape routes with precisely positioned barriers. As the last hunters fell, an unusual silence settled over the shrine grounds. The various factions had fought together seamlessly despite their political differences, united by common threat. Now, with the immediate danger eliminated, those differences began to reassert themselves as everyone assessed the aftermath. Issei found himself center of attention once more as representatives gathered to discuss implications of the coordinated attack. The primordial contamination in the hunters raised serious concerns beyond mere divine politics. Void cores confirm escalation timeline, Sona stated, her analytical mind already processing strategic implications. Primordial influence is extending into physical manifestation earlier than projected models suggested. The Church has recorded similar acceleration patterns across multiple regions, Xenovia added, cleaning her massive blade with practiced efficiency. Particularly in areas with recent divine activity. Susano's expression had grown grave. This is the third such probe I've encountered in recent months. The primordials are becoming more sophisticated in their approaches, using existing supernatural daters as vessels rather than creating obvious new entities that would trigger immediate response. Adaptation indicates intelligence, Rossweiss observed with professional concern. Asgardian models assumed reactive patterns, not strategic evolution. The technical discussion continued, with representatives sharing information about similar incidents and containment measures. Throughout, Issei noticed a fundamental shift in how they referenced him, no longer as a political prize to be claimed, but as a potentially significant factor in addressing the primordial threat. Amidst this strategic assessment, Issei became aware of Akeno watching him with concern. Moving slightly apart from the main group, she approached him quietly. "You're overextended," she observed, noting subtle fluctuations in his divine aura. "Combat demanded more energy than your developing essence is accustomed to channeling." Now that she mentioned it, Issei could feel unusual fatigue setting in, not physical exhaustion but something deeper. As though his divine core had been drained beyond sustainable levels. "I'm fine," he assured her, though the slight tremor in his electrical field betrayed the truth. "No, you're not," Akeno countered firmly. "Divine essence requires proper recovery cycles, especially during developmental phases. You need specialized restoration." She glanced toward the ongoing strategic discussion. "The political negotiations can continue without your direct presence. Your well-being takes priority." There was something in her tone, concern beyond professional obligation, protective instinct that transcended priestess duty. Issei found himself responding to that concern more than her words, allowing her to guide him toward the shrine building while the others remained focused on containment strategies. Inside the shrine, Akeno led him to a small inner chamber he hadn't seen during previous visits. Unlike the public worship space, this room appeared designed specify Kali for ceremonial purposes. Ancient symbols adorned the walls, and a raised platform in the center held what appeared to be a shallow bronze basin filled with clear water. "Restoration chamber," Akeno explained. Lighting ceremonial lamps that cast soft golden light throughout the space. Used historically to replenish divine essence depleted through combat or major manifestations. She gestured for Issei to sit on the platform beside the basin. The sacred order maintained these facilities even after thunder deities disappeared, preserving the knowledge and techniques for their eventual return. As she spoke, Akeno moved with ritual precision, adding specific elements to the water, crystal fragments that dissolved with subtle electrical discharge, herbs that released aromatic oils when crushed, and finally, several drops from a small vial containing luminescent liquid. "Divine tears," she explained, noting his curious expression. "Collected from the last thunder deity to visit this shrine. Preserved through specialized enchantment. They contain essence patterns that will help stabilize your depleted energy." The preparation complete, Akeno knelt opposite Issei, the basin between them. "Place your hands in the water," she instructed. "Allow your divine core to connect with the elements I've prepared." Issei complied, submerging his hands in the cool liquid. Immediately, he felt resonance. The water conducting subtle energies that seemed to recognize his thunder essence, responding with harmonious vibrations that spread up his arms and into his divine core. "Now close your eyes and focus inward," Akeno continued, her voice taking on the rhythmic cadence he'd come to associate with her ceremonial guidance. "Visualize your divine essence, not as energy or power, but as pattern and purpose. See the areas where today's combat has created dissonance or depletion." Following her instructions, Issei directed his awareness inward. His divine essence appeared in his mind's eye as an intricate lattice of electrical pathways surrounding a brilliant core, a structure both organic and geometric, constantly shifting yet maintaining fundamental coherence. Within this beautiful complexity, he could indeed see damaged areas, pathways disrupted by overexertion, connections weakened by demanding more power than his developing divine nature was ready to channel. "I see it," he murmured, maintaining the visualization. "Parts of the pattern are dimmer, less defined." "Perfect," Akeno approved. "Now, feel the resonance from the restoration elements. Allow them to I'd template and substance for your essence to rebuild itself. As she spoke, Akeno placed her own hands in the water, her fingers not quite touching his but close enough for their energies to interact through the conductive medium. The effect was immediate and powerful. Her Thunder Priestess energy harmonized perfectly with the restoration elements, creating a structured pattern that his divine essence could recognize and follow. The water serves as medium, she explained softly, maintaining the connection. The elements provide substance. My priestess energy offers pattern. But the reconstruction itself must come from your divine will, your intention to restore and strengthen. Understanding intuitively, Issei focused on that intention, not forcing recovery but inviting it, allowing his divine essence to recognize its ideal pattern and flow naturally toward restoration. The depleted areas began to illuminate, damaged pathways reconnecting as his thunder nature reasserted its fundamental coherence. The process was intimate in ways Issei hadn't expected, not physically, but energetically. Through the water connection, he could sense aspects of Akeno's essence normally hidden behind her composed exterior, her dedication to the sacred order, her personal connection to thunder energy, and something deeper, more personal that she seemed to guard carefully. Similarly, he realized he could perceive aspects of his developing divinity that even he wasn't fully conscious of, potential pathways, natural affinities, fundamental patterns that would define his divine nature as it matured. This mutual recognition created a moment of connection that transcended their formal roles, revealing person to person rather than merely deity to priestess. In that brief, perfect harmony, Issei sensed something unexpected. Resonance beyond functional compatibility, alignment that suggested their energies had known each other before, perhaps across multiple lifetimes. The revelation must have registered in his expression, because Akeno's eyes widened slightly, a faint blush coloring her cheeks as she realized what he had perceived. For a moment, her carefully maintained composure faltered, revealing genuine emotional response rather than ceremonial precision. The restoration is complete, she said after a moment, gently withdrawing her hands from the water. Your divine essence has re-established its core patterns. You should rest now to allow the process to finalize. As Issei removed his hands from the basin, he noticed the restoration water had changed, now glowing with subtle luminescence, charged with harmonized energy from their combined essence. What happens to the water? He asked, watching as Akeno carefully collected it in a crystal vial. It becomes sacred oil, she explained, her professional demeanor returning though something in her eyes remained softer, more personal. Used in thunder ceremonies and ritual protections. The combined essence it contains makes it particularly powerful. She sealed the vial and placed it in a small wooden box inscribed with protective symbols. The sacred order has maintained various forms of thunder deity essence throughout the centuries, preserving connection even when active gods no longer walked among us. This, she hesitated, then continued with subtle emphasis, this is the first new sacred oil created with living deity essence in over 100 years. The significance wasn't lost on Issei. Despite political complications and primordial threats, something fundamentally important had happened here, a sacred tradition continued. A connection maintained across time through their shared participation in ancient ceremony. Before he could respond to this meaningful moment, the shrine door slid open. Susanoo stood in the entrance, her ancient eyes taking in the restoration chamber and the lingering energy patterns from their ceremony with knowing perception. The priestess has tended you well, she observed, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. Divine essence restoration through traditional means, increasingly rare in this age of expedient solutions. She entered the chamber fully, her divine presence filling the space without overwhelming it, controlled power rather than dominating force. The strategic discussion continues outside, she informed them, but I wished to speak with you privately before departing. Her gaze fixed on Issei with ancient wisdom. Today's battle revealed much about your developing divine nature, young spark. Your instinctive approach to thunder manifestation suggests a protective rather than destructive primary aspect. Is that unusual? Issei asked. Not unprecedented, but significant, Susanoo replied. Thunder deities typically develop along dominance patterns first, mastery over storm, control of lightning as weapon. Your essence instead prioritized connection and harmonization, using thunder energy to unite rather than divide, to transform rather than destroy. She glanced at Akeno, something knowing in her expression. Perhaps influenced by your particular priestess's energy signature. The relationship between deity and serum. Onial counterpart often shapes early divine development. Akeno lowered her eyes slightly, though whether from modesty or to hide some reaction, Issei couldn't tell. Whatever the cause, Susanoo continued. This orientation could prove vital in addressing the primordial contamination. The void cores seek division and isolation. Entities capable of harmonic connection represent natural opposition to their fundamental nature. She approached Issei directly, placing a formal hand on his shoulder in what he somehow recognized as a traditional gesture between thunder deities. I will support the compromise framework your priestess has negotiated, she stated, her divine authority adding significant weight to this endorsement. Independence with collaborative support suits your particular manifestation pattern. I will convey this position to the Japanese Pantheon Council and suggest similar consideration from other thunder-aspected divine houses. The political support was valuable, but Issei sensed Susanoo's visit had deeper purpose than mere diplomatic positioning. There's something else, he said, recognizing truth in her subtle expression shift. Something about my awakening specifically. The storm goddess studied him with renewed interest. Perceptive. Yes, there is more. She glanced at Akeno. The priestess has likely suspected but would not speak without confirmation. Akeno's expression confirmed this assessment, concern mingled with cautious hope. Your divine essence contains a particular harmonic structure I've encountered only twice before in my long existence, Susanoo explained. A specific resonance pattern associated with counter-primordial manifestation, divine essence that emerges specifically in response to void contamination. She traced a symbol. L in the air between them, a complex pattern of interconnected lightning bolts that formed what appeared to be a seal or ward. This pattern exists within your developing divine core, though not yet fully formed. It suggests your awakening is not random but purposeful, part of a cosmic response to the failing eternal seals. The implications settled heavily on Issei's shoulders. His transformation wasn't merely personal evolution or coincidental timing. It represented specific cosmic purpose, divine manifestation with predetermined function. What does that mean for me? He asked, struggling to process this revelation. It means you have greater significance than even these political factions realize, Susanoo replied honestly. And that your development must be protected at all costs. If the pattern holds true to historical precedent, you represent one of several divine manifestations emerging as counterbalance to primordial resurgence. She turned to Akeno. The sacred orders RDS likely contain references to similar manifestation cycles. The priestess should consult the hidden archives regarding the third seal breach and subsequent divine responses. Akeno nodded, her expression grave. I will access the restricted scrolls tonight. Good. Susanoo moved toward the door, pausing for a final observation. The connection between you is unusually strong for such recent awakening. Nurture it. Such harmony between deity and priestess amplifies divine potential beyond ordinary parameters. With that parting insight, the storm goddess departed, leaving Issei and Akeno in momentary silence as they processed her revelations. Did you know, Issei finally asked, about this counter-primordial manifestation? I suspected, Akeno admitted quietly. Certain patterns in your divine essence matched historical descriptions from the order's texts. But confirmation required assessment from an active deity with direct experience of previous cycles. She met his gaze directly, her violet eyes reflecting both concern and conviction. This doesn't change our approach to your training, but it does confirm its importance. If Susanoo is correct, your development represents more than personal transformation, it serves cosmic purpose. The weight of responsibility felt overwhelming. Yesterday, Issei had been an ordinary high school student. Now he apparently carried divine essence specifically manifested to counter primordial threats to reality itself. Sensing his turmoil, Akeno moved closer, her presence offering grounding stability. Divine purpose doesn't eliminate choice, she assured him. Even cosmic roles allow for individual interpretation and expression. How you fulfill your function remains your decision. Her words provided unexpected comfort, acknowledging the significance of his awakening without removing his agency within it. Divine purpose might shape his path, but his choices would determine how he walked it. We should rejoin the others. Akeno suggested after allowing him a moment to process. The political negotiations have likely progressed, and your restored presence will be important in finalizing arrangements. As they prepared to leave the restoration chamber, Issei found himself pausing at the doorway, looking back at the space where their essences had connected so profoundly. Something significant had changed between him during that ceremony. Boundaries crossed, perceptions deepened, understanding expanded beyond formal roles. Akeno followed his gaze, seemingly reading his thoughts. The restoration ceremony often creates lasting connection between participants, she explained softly. Particularly when natural resonance already exists. Is that common? Issei asked. Between thunder deities and their priestesses. A subtle smile curved her lips. No, she admitted. It's quite rare, actually. The historical texts describe it as divine harmony, a perfect complementarity between essences that transcends conventional relationship patterns. She hesitated, then added with uncharacteristic vulnerability, I didn't expect to experience it personally. Most priestesses serve their entire lives without finding such resonance with a deity. The admission created another moment of connection between them, not energetic this time, but emotional. Whatever cosmic purpose might shape their paths forward, is personal harmony represented something equally significant on an individual level. Outside, the political negotiations had indeed progressed substantially. With Susanoo's endorsement added to the framework Akeno had proposed, the representatives had moved from competitive positioning to collaborative implementation, defining specific protocols, responsibilities, and boundaries that would govern Issei's unique status. As they rejoined the gathering, Issei noticed subtle changes in how the representatives interacted with him, less as a political asset to be claimed and more as a significant ally to be supported. The primordial threat had created common purpose that transcended factional differences, at least temporarily. We've reached preliminary agreement, Rias informed them as they approached. A joint protection framework with the Sacred Order maintaining primary training authority, Asgardian security protocols, and Devil territorial considerations. With church observation rights, Zenobia added firmly, making clear her faction's continued involvement despite late entry to the negotiations. The formal documentation will require additional review, Sona noted, her analyst. ICAL precision evident even in preliminary agreement. But operational protocols can begin immediately, including enhanced security measures, Rossweiss added. Today's coordinated attack suggests information leakage regarding your divine status. We'll need to implement containment strategies for both physical and informational protection. The practical implications began to sink in. Issei's life would change dramatically under these new arrangements. School, family relationships, daily routines, all would need adjustment to accommodate his divine development and the protection requirements it necessitated. What about my parents? He asked, suddenly concerned about their safety. If hunters targeted the shrine, they might go after my family too. Already addressed, Rias assured him. The Grimoire House has assigned protective details to monitor your family residence. Subtle wards have been placed that will alert us to supernatural approaches. Additionally, Sona added, we've prepared memory modification protocols should direct explanation become necessary. For now, however, maintaining normal appearances serves security interests better than disclosure. Their thoroughness was both reassuring and somewhat disturbing. These supernatural factions had apparently planned for every contingency, including manipulating his family's memories if required. The casual way they discussed such measures highlighted the vast differences between human and supernatural ethical frameworks. As the sun began to set over the shrine grounds, the representatives prepared to depart, returning to their respective territories to formalize the agreements reached. The battle damage had been efficiently repaired through combined magical efforts, leaving little evidence of the afternoon's conflict. Zenobia approached Issei before leaving, her direct manner unchanged by the diplomatic proceedings. You fought effectively, she stated with professional assessment. Unconventional approach but tactically sound. I will include positive evaluation in my report to the Vatican Division. Coming from her, the simple statement felt like high praise. Thank you for your help, Issei replied. Your combat skills were impressive. Standard exorcist training with specialized applications, she replied matter-of-factly. Durandal enhances effectiveness against corruption-type entities. She studied him with analytical intensity, her expression suggesting internal calculation. Your divine signature is unusual. Different from historical thunder patterns in church records. I will need to observe your development more directly. Without waiting for response to this statement, she turned and departed with military precision, leaving Issei wondering if he'd just gained Annette. Her official monitor alongside Rossweiss. As the various representatives left the shrine grounds, Issei found himself standing with Akeno in the growing twilight. The day's events had transformed his understanding of his awakening, his potential role in cosmic events, and the political landscape surrounding divine manifestation. What happens now? He asked quietly. Training intensifies, Akeno replied. With the primordial connection confirmed, your development timeline accelerates. We'll need to focus on both combat readiness and essence stabilization. She glanced toward the sunset, her profile elegant against the fading light. The compromise framework provides breathing room politically, but all factions will be watching your progress carefully. Their cooperation remains counting on your continued development along beneficial patterns. And us? Issei asked, the question encompassing more than he could articulate directly. The connection during the restoration ceremony. Akeno turned to face him fully, her composed expression softening into something more personal. Divine harmony creates bonds that transcend ordinary relationships, she said quietly. The sacred order has traditions for such connections, protocols that acknowledge the spiritual intimacy while maintaining appropriate ceremonial boundaries. There was something in her tone, not rejection of deeper connection, but caution about its proper expression during his developmental phase. The priestess serves the deity, but also guides and grounds divine essence during manifestation, she continued. Emotional entanglement can complicate that function, particularly during early awakening stages. She was establishing necessary boundaries, Issei realized, not from lack of reciprocal feeling, but from professional responsibility to his divine development. The realization brought both disappointment and respect. I understand, he said, meaning it despite the conflicted emotions beneath the words. Akeno's violet eyes studied him with appreciation for his maturity. That understanding itself demonstrates growth, she observed. Your human essence and divine nature are integrating harmoniously, balancing cosmic purpose with personal experience. The observation eased some of his uncertainty. Whatever path their connection might follow, it would unfold naturally alongside his divine development rather than in opposition to it. As darkness settled over the shrine, Akeno lit traditional lamps along the main pathway. Their soft golden light created pools of warmth in the growing night, a human touch amidst sacred ground. You should return home soon, she advised. After today's events, your divine essence needs proper rest to continue integration. Tomorrow we'll begin adapted training protocols based on what we've learned. Will you be safe here alone? Issei asked, concerned after the day's attack. A small smile curved her lips. The shrine's protections have been significantly enhanced by today's combined efforts. Additionally, she gestured subtly toward the perimeter, where Issei detected at least 3 supernatural presences maintaining discreet surveillance. Our new allies take their security responsibilities seriously. The knowledge that devils, Asgardians, and apparently church representatives were now coordinating his protection represented a dramatic shift from just days earlier. Political necessity had created unlikely cooperation among traditionally competitive factions. As Issei prepared to leave, Akeno accompanied him to the Torii gate. In the lamplit darkness, her features seemed both younger and more ancient, the human girl and the timeless priestess existing simultaneously in perfect balance. Issei, she said as they reached the threshold, using his given name without honorific for the first time. What happened during the restoration ceremony, the harmony we experienced, it's significant beyond political considerations or cosmic purpose. She met his gaze directly, allowing genuine emotion to show through her ceremonial composure. Whatever divine path unfolds before you, know that the sacred order, that I, will walk it alongside you. Not merely from duty or tradition, but from genuine harmony of essence. The simple declaration contained layers of meaning, acknowledgement of their personal connection alongside professional commitment. Recognition of feelings developing between them while maintaining appropriate boundaries for his current developmental stage. Thank you, Issei replied, the inadequate words ying deeper meaning through the resonance of their connected energies. For everything. As he departed down the shrine steps, Issei felt Akeno watching from the Torii gate, her priestess energy a steady, harmonious presence in his developing divine awareness. Despite the political complications, cosmic implications, and supernatural dangers surrounding his awakening, that connection represented something real and meaningful, a personal anchor amidst divine transformation. The path ahead remained uncertain, filled with training challenges, political navigation, and apparently, cosmic purpose. But he would not walk it alone. The sacred order, the reluctant alliance of supernatural factions, and most importantly, Akeno herself, would accompany him through whatever came next. And somehow, had made even divine responsibilities seem manageable. Chapter 3 End. The end. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next video.